Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the July 5th, 2022 regular meeting of council. Nice to have a few folks in the mix, and welcome everyone. So with that, I think, Judy, let's go ahead and call the roll.
Yes, Tausch.
I'm here.
Stokes, I am told, will shortly be here.
Yes.
McQueen. Here. Brown.
Here.
DeVore Leonard.
Here.
Also present is Village Manager Josue Salmeron, Solicitor Brianne Parcels, and I think we have Johnny Burns, Public Works Supervisor on the Zoom. Director, sorry.
Yes, thank you. All right, well, I think first of all, we've got some exciting happenings, and we're going to swear in Kenneth, who has been doing a great job, I know already. And so, Kenneth, why don't you come up, and Mayor Pam, and let's get you sworn in.
Front and center, sir.
Alrighty, sounds good.
Yes. We want the folks at home to have a good look at you. If you'd raise your right hand, please. I solemnly, and repeat after me. I solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution and will obey the laws of the United States and of the state of Ohio, that I will in all respects observe the provisions of the charter and ordinances of the Village of Yellow Springs, and will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of police officer. It's official.
All right, thank you. All right. And Kenneth, I also like to make sure that everybody gets one of our Yellow Springs pins. So, yes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, welcome. All right.
Welcome. Well, let's maybe we'll go down the road.
Were you going to say something?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
No, it's fine.
All right, Chief, yes.
Absolutely. So just want to welcome Ken with open arms. He's been a delight. He's been on board and training for, what are we going on, 3 weeks now, I think? All right. He has comes to us with about 6.5 years experience in law enforcement, a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. He was also a member of the National Honor Society for Criminal Justice, and just recently acquired his master's degree in public administration. He is a very, very impressive guy and police officer, and so far he's shown to be just an excellent human being. So he's going to be an outstanding fit here, and we are just incredibly fortunate, and I appreciate you. I'm glad you're here. So he's also joined by his mother tonight, so which always have to say thanks to the family, because law enforcement can be such a sacrifice. So thank you for loaning us to him. So thank you, guys.
Walking around town. Glad that you were enjoying. Yes. All right. Excellent. Yeah, great way to start off the meeting. And we are going to move into announcements. So, Mark Heiss, why don't you start us off?
I'm under announcement.
You are.
He's got a presentation.
Oh, a special presentation? Yes. Oh, so, okay. All right, well, even better. We'll wait for that.
Oh,
so.
Well, I am going to say that Mark put in many, many miles yesterday and many, many hours. So if your spiel is,
we would be happy for you to if you would like to present now. Yes.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yes. Lots of great stuff going on with the chamber.
Yes. For those who don't know me, my name is Mark Heiss. I'm the president of the Chamber of Commerce, and I'm also the local resident of Yellow Springs. I just want to take a few moments to thank the village for their support of the chamber and all Yellow Springs businesses over the last 3 years, which have been very difficult for all of us. As you know, the chamber no longer has a paid staff, but we have a dedicated group of volunteer board members and chamber members that are intent on partnering with the village and community to help make Yellow Springs a better place for our residents, businesses, and our visitors. The chamber's just finished. I wanted to let you know what the chamber was up to. We just finished setting up a new membership platform, which will empower our businesses to actually be able to enter events on their own and maintain their own directories so that we don't have to have a paid staff to go in and intercede every time. What that means, as an example, and I'll use the example of Agraria. Agraria has been able to go in and enter multiple community events and make the community and visitors alike aware of the programs, the important programming that they have to offer. Prior to my being part of the Chamber Board, I was made aware later that the village had charged the Chamber with developing an app to provide a guide to Yellow Springs, and the Chamber has partnered with Honeycomb, a local IT company, to make this a reality by tying into our new membership platform that I just mentioned. Because they were going to be able to tie into this new platform, and the platform that we're using is actually, they have 65% of the chambers that are presently using membership platforms as a part of their constituency. Honeycomb will be able to make this product, once they complete it, available to chambers across the country. And they'll be partnering with Growth Zone, which is the platform that we're using. So we're excited about being able to facilitate that kind of growth with the local company. What I do want to do is make sure that the village council knows, as well as anybody who's viewing that's a part of the community, that we are refocusing our efforts. And we started that last year during the holiday tree lighting, and we're becoming more community centric. We still represent the businesses, and it's still important for us to represent the businesses, but it's also important for us to help make Yellow Springs a better place. Because of that, we've refocused our efforts as far as events are concerned. You've seen us involving ourselves with the 4th of July festivities this last weekend, helping to raise funds for the Oddfellows to help fill the coffers for the fireworks fund, as well as partnering with the Buckeye Trail Association, Rail Trails, and the Rails to Trails Conservancy to set up Yellow Springs Trails Days this last year. One of the questions that everybody has on their mind is, what about street fair? And I wanted to let you know that street fair applications went live quietly last week. We'll be spreading the word about that a little more as we get. It's basically a soft opening to make sure there's no bugs in the new registration system. But one of the things that's changed about street fair is an emphasis again on our local constituents, especially our local businesses and our local residents. In prior years, we've had folks who have been coming to street fair for years and years who are used to basically getting their own way, setting up wherever they have in previous years. Because of the feedback that we received from the community and from businesses, we're making first availability to businesses who have a presence in the downtown district to have space in front of their businesses available so that it has regular vendor spaces in order to leverage street fair instead of it being a time that they view as not making as much money. We're also prioritizing the idea of local entrepreneurs and local residents having preference to being able to have vendor spaces over folks that are coming in from the outside. So I just wanted you to make you aware of that. We've got a lot of exciting events coming up that are community centric, and watch for some information soon on a Halloween party for the community.
All right. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
I think we also appreciate you stepping up leadership-wise. As you know, the village and the chamber, we want to be very collaborative, and thanks for helping to promote our community. So, yeah, we're already getting some great feedback, I want to say, with potential new businesses that I'm excited about. Carmen.
Mark, thanks again. That's great news. So I have a question.
Yes.
So say there's a local entrepreneur who would like to have preference, or at least kind of first dibs at a spot. Do they just reach out to the chamber directly, email, phone?
They would go ahead and fill out an application, and in the other box, they would just explain what they're looking for.
Okay, and then you guys would be able to discern whether the person was local or not?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, cool, thank you, I appreciate it.
And that's one of the things that we're tightening down on as well, is the people who identify themselves as local and whether they are or not.
Gotcha, okay, thanks.
Thanks, Carmen. Mary Ann, did you have?
No,
All right.
what you're doing.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right.
And by the way, seriously, in regards to what you said, Brian, it's not only my pleasure, but it's a privilege. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
We're still in announcements.
We are. And were you going to do some thank yous around 4th of July?
Mark, before you go, I was going to give you more thanks. I want to thank Mark, the Odd Fellows, and all the volunteers and various organizations, particularly some of my colleagues, which are Johnny Burns, the Public Works team, Paige, and the Public Safety team. So many groups came together to ensure that we had a very successful 4th of July event. That's the most recent event, but just last week we also had Pride Parade and Festival, and we've just gone through a string of events, and all have been outstanding.
Yes.
And, in regards to Mark and the relationship with Mark, we had a community spotlight in the Dayton Business Journal that have gotten great feedback. Mark and his team's been instrumental in continuing our business market appeal for the community. So thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, so, speaking of Pride, it was another amazing celebration. Josue and I missed Kevin being out there at the grill with us.
Grandkids.
But we were sweating it out, and that was really fun. And I don't know if you want to say anything more about the community picnic.
I thought it was great. I wish more people would have been there, but I think given the audience and the attendance we've had a good turnout. It continues to grow, so I imagine it only gets bigger and better from here on.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, for sure. And
we have some aprons, don't we?
We do, yeah. If everyone wants to.
As gaprons.
Okay, gaprons, yes, I like it.
Yeah.
See, there you go. I think I left mine at home. It's a little dirty, but all right.
Mine is unworn and unused until now.
See?
So that box check.
So, Mary Ann, I also noticed it was the second anniversary of being a wildlife habitat
Yeah, I think it's
community,
the
and I didn't know if you
third,
wanted to say
actually.
anything about that.
Yes, I do. I want to. Yes, so I think it's the third year. But at any rate, Yellow Springs has been certified by the National Wildlife Federation as a wildlife habitat community. And every year, we have to get recertified by doing particular activities, which we did a number of, including sponsoring Earth Day in April. So we now have 106 properties in the village that are certified.
How many?
106.
Wow.
Which I think is about the same number. We were having a conversation about how many solar applications there are on residents and businesses, about the same, which represents about 5%, both of those numbers, about 5% of our residents. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Awesome. Josue, do you want to talk about the safe routes to school? I saw that we got an email about that the plans are finalized.
Yes, our plans for the safe routes to school, the design and engineering has been finalized. We're actually going to start setting up next week. So you'll see some signs and equipment along Limestone. And this is the Safe Routes to School project. As a reminder, we're installing a sidewalk from Bill Duncan Park down to Walnut Street. So all along on the school side of the street.
Excellent.
So expect some activity there. We've modified the project a little bit given the time in which we started the project. It's already early July. We have planned on starting in June. Like with a lot of things happening in the construction space, equipment's hard to come by, supplies are hard to come by, and scheduling gets even tougher. So our initial plan was to start on the north side of the Bill Duncan side of the project, but being so close to the beginning of the school year, we're going to start the project on the school side so we can complete that section of the sidewalk first and then work our way up towards Bill Duncan.
Great. So great. So just a few other things. I wanted to highlight because I'm not sure it was really news, but I guess there was some confusion after the last meeting about our executive session. And so I wanted to highlight a few things about that. One of those being that I think it's important for the community to know that we don't want to have executive sessions. In general, like anything that we can talk about in public is where I think we're at. But I did want to clarify because I think the mention about some confusion. I looked at Judy's email that went to the paper and to council, and it seemed pretty clear to me that we had a 6:30 executive session and that was it. But I understand that, there was some confusion around having one afterwards. The reason we didn't have an executive session, a longer one before and after, was that this was about interviewing potentially new legal support. And we're doing that tomorrow, as a matter of fact. So I just wanted to be clear that there was nothing mysterious or whatever. We just didn't have the folks lined up to do that. So I think it's important to remember, though, that executive sessions are not something that we generally want to have, because the more we can have things in public, the better. The other thing I wanted to mention was, what was it? Related to, where is this? Oh, yeah. And I think we're going to be talking about this later, but obviously, this community cares a lot about the attack on women's reproductive rights, and we're going to be talking more about actions that we can do locally and anything else. Carmen, I'm hoping that you might be able to be our council lead on some of these initiatives. So I guess I want, we didn't have a chance to talk about this outside of the meeting, but I know that there are some groups that want to meet with council, and so I guess if that's something that you are interested and able to do, I think that would be great.
Of course.
So otherwise, I think let's go ahead and move into our consent agenda. And we have the minutes from our last meeting. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Second.
I move.
Okay, all right. And I forget, do we have to pull this off the agenda, or what's the?
No, you can just go ahead and
Okay,
vote on it.
all right.
unless
So
change-
all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great. So next up is a review of the agenda. One thing we want to do is we're going to move the manager's report to right after special reports until that becomes official. Any other things we need to change, remove?
Would
Marion?
like to, I submitted a request, I would like to, for new business, submit that council vote on 2 issues. One about developing a policy around use of herbicides, and the other to delay the use of herbicides at Ellis Pond until we can get together people who have offered their expertise as volunteers to look at long-term and short-term solutions for Ellis Pond.
Okay, great. We'll put that under new business unless there are any objections. And actually, I remember the other thing I wanted to mention, so I'm going to bump this in. There also seems to be some confusion about the village wanting to intervene with the Kingwood Solar Project. And I was surprised to get a call from one of our township trustees asking why we were inquiring about this. I'm not going to speak for everybody else, but I thought we were pretty clear that we support the townships, we're not intervening, not to mention that it's too late to intervene anyway. But, if I'm misspeaking about that, let me know. But I did just want to let our township partners know that we're not planning to intervene as far as I know. Okay?
Did we vote on this?
What's that?
Well, you said we support the township. Did we vote?
We never voted. We just
So
never
I don't think it's fair to say we support the township.
Okay, so we can stick with that, we're not planning to intervene, is that okay?
Yeah.
All right, great. Okay, so with that, Kevin, petitions and communications.
All right, thank you, Brian. So the clerk has received a letter from Lindsay Burke regarding action on overturning Roe v. Wade, another letter from Lindsay Burke with an email thread, letter from Monarch City offering thank you. There's a wildlife habitat community recertification that we touched on a little earlier. And to the point that Marianne was just raising, she's offered a letter regarding a pesticide proposal and request. We also have here at the table that I will just mention, okay, a letter from a group of midwives, nurses, and doctors living in Yellow Springs committed to protecting women's reproductive choices. And the group is very well represented by several medical professionals. So that's what we have currently in terms of petitions and communications.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. And I did want to mention that letter, which will be in the next packet, because I think we just got it today. I noticed Kirsten Bean's name on there, and I hope that means that we will get some support from Greene County Public Health with our efforts. So, because I know she's very involved. Well, she's an employee. All right. Let's go ahead and go into legislation. And first off is Resolution 2022-38.
Right.
Oh, sorry.
So can we talk about this letter in the sections where we're talking about other, like, Roe v. Wade response, or is it not appropriate to talk about it until the next meeting?
No, I think we will talk about it today, and I was thinking that we would talk about it when we came to those resolutions. So,
Thank you.
Okay, cool. Okay. Resolution 2022-38. Judy, we can do that by title only.
All right, this is approving the Finance Director's 2023 tax budget for the Village of Yellow Springs.
Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Josue.
All right, I am bringing it up. So this kicks off the beginning of our tax preparation season. We start the season with a submission to the county on our estimated resources. And the estimated resources does two things, it's included in your packet. Looks at what are the resources, the cash resources we expect to end the year with. Come December 31st of 2022, what do we expect to end the year with? So there's a schedule just highlighting that. Then we estimate the revenues we expect for 2023. There are two primary revenue sources that we plan around at this part of the year. That is property taxes and income taxes. So the property tax estimates have already been issued to us by David Graham, who's the Greene County auditor. So those numbers are provided by our auditor as the estimated resources on property taxes. So we received that estimate, we put those into our budget preparation sheet, and then we've also received estimates from Rita on what is our expected to be our income tax collections. So those numbers are reflected in there. So that's the primary sources that you're looking at today, and what you're voting on to accept these as your preliminary, as your tax budget for 2023, and we send it off to the county auditor to certify. What also is included in this resolution and packet that you're receiving are 2-year financials, the estimated expenditures for 2022, and the estimated expenditures for 2023. This year, I took the liberty of giving you 3 years of actuals, and the reason for it is that we have we've gone through the pandemic, and that has affected the numbers significantly. So I've included the actuals from 2019, 2020, 2021, the current year estimates, which is 2022, and the budget estimates for 2023. In short, I know looking at our budget, we're trending along with our previous expenditures. So in 2019, we spent 3.6 million. In 2020 was 3.3. If you recall, we had to make a lot of cuts to come in below the adjusted estimates as a response to the pandemic. In 2021, we went back to our 3.6 budget, and in 2022, we're at 3.9. We've had a lot of capital projects that we are anticipating, capital expenditures. So we've got the Safe Routes to School project, the stormwater project, other major projects, and that's what's pushing the number. So that's for 2022. For 2023, we're budgeting around a $3.7 million budget. With the estimated resources, this is the rest of the budget, but the totals end up being the same. On the estimated cash reserves, we are still above our 90-day cash reserve that we've been working on. So even with these numbers, we expect to end up at above $1.8 million in cash reserves in the general fund. Any questions on what I covered so far? Okay. The enterprise funds, this is the look at all of our enterprise, all of our funds. I'm going to make this bigger so it's visible. This sheet highlights at a very high level what are the estimated resources that we expect to begin the year with, what are going to be our receipts for the year, what's available for expenditures, what we anticipate spending on personnel services, other services, that includes everything else outside of personnel, and what our total expenditures are. We try to maintain the budget as much as we can as it is now, taking out the big expenditures, capital expenditures that are meant to be one-time expenditures. So once all those things are factored in, this is what our total revenue funds balance, what we're beginning with, what we planning to bring in, what we have available for total expenditures, what we plan on spending on personnel, what we plan on spending on everything else outside of personnel, and we expect to spend around $1.9 million. And this is our balances at the end of 2023. We expect to be at above 1.8 million on the general fund and over 700 on capital projects and over 1 million on special revenue funds. Any questions on this? And reminder, this is the beginning of a budget process. We'll go through at least 3 work sessions plus 2 council hearings to finalize the 2023 budget.
And as a side note, the Finance Committee is meeting in 2 weeks before the next meeting to talk about a schedule for budget that we'll look at the next meeting. I noticed there was a line for federal, state, and other grants, and I wondered why Safe Routes to School and our service transportation grant and then I guess, our recent capital budget allocation, which I know is like kind of piddly, but.
Yes, excellent question, Brian. The federal grant dollars that you see reflected here, this is actual cash that we receive directly that we book on our books. Mm-hmm. Brian knows this and he's asking for the benefit of the general public. The 2 other grants that Brian's mentioned, the Safe Routes to School and the Day and Storm Reroute project, those are funds, or those are projects that ODOT pays directly. So that money doesn't come to us and we don't book it on our balance sheet. That's money that ODOT has and directs towards the projects. So what we're reflecting on our books, it's money that we receive. So this $392,000, this is the CARES money, this is the American Rescue funds that we received. If you recall, last year as part of our 2022 budget, Council approved the recognizing of both American Rescue distributions as part of our 2022 budget. So that's being reflected here in our 2022 budget, that we are recognizing that revenue, all that revenue in 2022.
Any other questions? Marianne?
I have a comment, a suggestion, I guess, for the Finance Committee, because I remember last year, Council came in with requests after staff, and there was concern about that. So I'm going to suggest that the Finance Committee sort of project what council requests might be. I mean, this is going to have to be a back and forth, but so that that gets put into the original thinking, so that we don't feel like staff is going to have to remove things for council, or council is going to have to remove, I mean, it's clearly negotiation, but.
Yep, excellent point. Go ahead, Gavin.
Just the other thing that we discussed that's, I think, directly related is the idea of having council see and maybe to some degree sort of participate in seeing the staff budget, because I think there's been some, essentially staff cuts a bunch of stuff before council's seen it in the past, and then it's sort of frustrated because then stuff. So anyway, just showing the flip side of what you just said. Yeah. So this year we're hoping that everybody sees what cuts everybody has to make.
Yep. Anything else? Okay. All right. If not, thank you. All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. All right, so next up is Resolution 2022-42, and Judy, we can do that by title only.
Approving a $30,000 grant to Yellow Springs Home, Inc. for pre-development funding for an affordable YS senior housing project.
All right, can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right. So Mary Ann, I think since you highlighted that we had talked about this last year, if you want to say anything.
Sure. So Home Inc. Has the property behind the new fire station, and as people know, I think they tried two times, I think, to go through the state with tax credit projects, and decided that that's just not going to work for Yellow Springs. So the idea of the project now is either might be sort of attached cottages or larger buildings that have rental units in it, and probably mostly senior, but not only senior. So there'd be some families too. And so the pre-development money is to help get drawings and things like that before they can even go for funding. And we had agreed to fund the $30,000, and I think they indicated that they might come back again, but that's another story.
Okay. All right. So any questions or comments?
I would just add that in part of the background that Marianne shared about Home Inc. going through the different funding rounds, if you will, the short of it is most of those funds that they were trying to attach themselves to or be granted ended up being directed to more Appalachian communities, and we didn't quite fit the profile of where those funds were going to be directed. And so, as Marianne suggested, Home Inc. did go officially through 2 rounds, and in the 3rd and 4th rounds, they assessed that the scoring, had they attempted to apply, would not have been high enough for them to receive. So they've stopped with the 54-unit larger building, and now we're looking at cottages rather, in a phased approach. And yes, we did agree, unless we were dreaming about it, to fund them at $30,000, and then it seemed to have gotten lost, but I think we found it. So we're back, and so happy to see this moving forward.
Yeah, and Kevin, I think that's great that you highlighted that, because that was one of the issues. And in fact, I wrote a letter on behalf of the village to ask that they consider scoring outside of like the preference for the Appalachian communities. And those 5 points make all the difference. Like otherwise, the Home Inc. project like basically scored perfectly, but that was what was keeping them out of the loop. So good that you mentioned that.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else?
All for me.
All right. Then all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. All right, Resolution 2022-43. Judy, let's go ahead and read that in full, please.
All right, this is dissenting from the United States Supreme Court decision to overturn the Roe versus Wade ruling. Whereas on June 24th, 2022, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled to overturn Roe v. Wade, the decision granting a right held by women in this country for 50 years to seek safe legal abortions. And whereas in 1973, the Supreme Court ruled by a vote of 7-2 that a woman's right to choose regarding termination of her pregnancy was protected by the U.S. Constitution, and whereas the current decision by the Supreme Court is a contradiction of the values and respect for personal choice and privacy in decision-making held by most villagers, and whereas Village Council adamantly upholds the rights and freedoms of every individual and supports the right of every woman to control the autonomy of her own body, and whereas Village Council calls upon Ohio legislators to listen to the majority of our state's residents and make abortion legal and equitably available in Ohio. And whereas Village Council acknowledges that the impact of these recent legal decisions disproportionately affects economically disadvantaged persons and urges our legislators to not only restore abortion rights, but to require Ohio Medicaid coverage for abortion medication and services. And whereas Village Council also encourages all residents to contact their local and state representatives to express their opinions, now therefore be it resolved by the Council for the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio, that we do hereby, Section 1, rebuke the U.S. Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. Section 2, commit to taking every possible action available to us as elected officials to protect the rights of women. Section 3, affirm a woman's constitutional right to an abortion and encourage village residents and all citizens of Ohio to make your voices and your votes heard at local, state, and federal levels.
All right, can I get a motion?
I move.
Second.
Okay, so I will begin by highlighting that one of the aspects, at least, where I'm coming from, is that we're disgusted, we're frustrated, it's untenable, but we need to focus on what we can do, and I think action is important. And there's been a lot of talk about what that means, and in fact, the next resolution is, I think, going to be one of our first steps in terms of action. But I want to be really clear, and this is when I mentioned earlier that it's great that Carmen is able to be our lead on council for how we can move forward and do what we can locally, given this attack on private rights, personal rights, and folks basically trying to impose their religious and moral beliefs on others, which is incredibly undemocratic, inappropriate, and really sad. So I know this is really important to all of council members, and I welcome any other comments from folks.
Well, Brian, I will just say that I appreciate, excuse me, the letter that you penned on behalf of council, because it did, touch on many of the salient points. They're also represented here in the resolution, and that phrase that us doing what we are empowered to do. It might not seem that we have a lot of power in doing a lot of things. A lot of the burden, if you will, does tend to fall on employers, and I know Josue has spoken to that to some degree. But this does show, our commitment to do something, and to make a commitment to do whatever we can moving forward. So appreciate all the effort that's being formulated in the village, and to Gavin's point, with the letter that was given to us by the medical professionals, it does show a great deal of support for the efforts that we are undertaking. So, thank you.
All right, thanks, Kevin. Carmen?
Sure. What I want to express completely is that although we've been dealt this blow, for some of us, we've had to navigate this assault on personhood and freedoms for many, many years. So you have the company of women and other community members who are used to navigating in these spaces. And although it's going to be difficult and trying, it's important that we move strategically and that we understand that our bodies are our bodies no matter what any government individual says, period. Our bodies are ours. We've been doing this for a very, very long time, millennia. And in spite of all the hype, no one has control over your body. And I'm committed individually to doing all that I can for anyone who might find themselves in a situation where they need this medical procedure to help any way that I can.
Thanks, Carmen. Yeah, I think that also highlights that we are going to respond to, I know some folks have asked about what the village can do, and we're exploring that. But to Carmen's point, one way or another, we are going to support every woman's right to have access to safe abortions. Gavin?
I think everything's been said. Thank you.
Okay. Marianne?
My comments to the next resolution, which I think is more the teeth of it.
Okay, great. Any comments from citizens? Okay. Up. Laura?
Well, just real quick, many private companies have decided to fund expenses for their employees who need to leave the state. I would suggest we consider that.
Yes.
I think I already know what this answer is going to be from the state of Ohio, but
right.
The state auditor's office, but I think it's worth at least trying and offering that to our employees.
Thanks, Laura. Yeah, and that was what I was referencing before. If we can't figure out a way to do it as a local government, then we're going to figure out something else. So thank you. Okay. Judy, let's go ahead and call the roll on this one.
All right, Stokes?
Yes.
McQueen?
Yes.
Brown?
Yes.
DeVore Leonard?
Yes.
Pausch?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so our last piece of legislation is Resolution 2022-44, and Judy, we can do that by title only.
Okay, this is establishing the Village of Yellow Springs' intention not to prioritize enforcement of state laws that criminalize abortion.
Can I get a motion?
So moved. Second.
Okay. All right, so I'll lead this one off briefly. I, last week, was contacted by someone from the press who mentioned that the city of Dayton passed a resolution of this nature and asked if Yellow Springs was going to do something similar. And I was like, hell yeah. And I think related to that, we have modified the resolution in keeping with our village values. But for some of you that track what the village has done, this reminds me a lot of our legislation to not support ICE in going after undocumented citizens. And it's sad that we have to continue to think about these issues, but this, I think, is well within our purview as a charter community, and we are definitely going to support this along with other efforts. Marianne, I heard that you had some comments related to this one?
Well, I thought it would be good to sort of tease out what this is saying. I assume we're not saying we are directing our police department not to do anything. Can someone, I'm sorry, the chief isn't here, but can someone talk about what this means, like in an example, or should we not do that? I mean, what does it mean on the ground?
Okay. Josue?
Sure, this is similar to what council, another resolution the council passed regarding marijuana use to not prioritize the prosecution of those crimes. Our peace officers have a legal responsibility to enforce the law. So they're still bound by state law. How they go about it, there's some discretion and some flexibility. So this resolution, it clearly states council's position on how to prioritize these state crimes, if you will. I'm required to choose my words wisely on the matter.
I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
So as a community, we have discretion on what we are asking our police officers to focus on and what we're asking them not to focus on, or.
Yeah, I think, and it's referenced in the resolution, I think a good point that's made is that we have important issues related to public safety. This is on the opposite end of that spectrum. Carmen, were you gonna?
Yeah, I just want to add something really quickly. So because of, how does this work? So I imagine that someone is accused of having a medical procedure. We're going to call it a medical procedure because that's what it is. Because of HIPAA, HIPAA says that it's nobody's business what we do with our bodies. Medical, and as far as medical, it's a medical procedure. And so I'm just trying to wrap my head around that language, because it's like, oh, well, I heard that someone had a medical procedure, and then the police go and ask, did you have that medical procedure? Well, that's none of your business. So I don't know. I mean, I know that this language has to be in here, but it's a little tricky to see how it would apply, if that makes sense.
Yeah, go ahead. I'll give some example, maybe a couple more concrete example. If an officer is responding to what may be somebody experiencing a medical emergency, they're not going to ask, did you
Have an abortion.
They absolutely cannot ask that.
We're not going to be asking those things.
And
if the
cannot.
person needs medical attention, we're going to do, the right thing is to make sure they get the medical attention that they need.
Right.
It also then would apply to people providing, this is a question, does it apply to people providing advice, transportation, pills, whatever?
Yep, all the above. And I think, the reason why I drew the analogy to our policy related to ICE is because, ultimately, the worst case scenario, which I'm hoping Ohio is not gonna go there, but we know other states are talking about, that they would basically call our local police department and say, we have a warrant for the arrest of, this person. We want you to act on that. And our response would be, we don't have time for that kind of stuff. So that's where, this really has an impact.
We prioritize the well-being of all of our residents above all else, the well-being and safety. We had an example where we had someone experiencing a medical emergency, and there was an arrest warrant out for that individual. We took that person to the ER. That's what we felt the right thing to do. We're not going to handcuff them and wait for another jurisdiction to come from. We sought medical care for that person.
which is what is, that is to be done, though that's everywhere. That is to be done. You are to prioritize medical emergencies over handcuffing someone. That is, I mean, so that's not unique to Yellow Springs. That's what we're supposed to do.
Right, but it's not what's being done. So I mean, I think that's why it's important to codify.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Jessica.
Jessica Thomas, Yellow Springs News. So just to kind of clarify my understanding of the legislation, I know most of this conversation has been focusing on people who might be seeking medical care, but I would like to hear someone speak to how it also will affect, or in some cases protect, folks providing medical care. Because to Carmen's point, I think that privacy kind of is on the side of people seeking abortions or medicine for abortions, but we also want to protect people providing those things to allow women to exercise their right to their own bodies.
Right. Yeah, great question. And I'll say that, this resolution, again, patterned off of Dayton, which also, they have a prosecutor. And so they also name the prosecutor as also deprioritizing this, these state abortion laws. So this would definitely extend to any person implicated under an abortion law. That being said, though, I think what it does highlight, and the letter that we received today references this as well, is that we think there are other things that we can do locally, whether that, and we're still trying to figure out what that looks like, but certainly discussions around a sanctuary city for women's reproductive rights and those sorts of things are part of what we're going to look into. So I expect this to be an ongoing process, and part of this is going to be a discussion with the community and the people that have expertise around this. Sarah.
Hi. Since ICE is being used as a comparison. Sarah Sinclair Amend.
Resident.
Yep. Since ICE is being used as a comparison, I do want to remind everyone that having a set procedure is important, because do you remember one of our citizens was taken to the Greene County jail for I think it was a stop sign violation and not having a license, and then they ended up in ICE custody for several months.
Right, and unfortunately that happened after we reacted to that. So, but you're right.
Make sure that there is an actual policy and procedure, and this isn't just, sat away in a drawer.
Yep, thanks, Sarah. Yeah, it was unfortunate that we weren't proactive about that, and we will be on this one. Thank you.
Really quickly, I would like to stop comparing those two things. I understand why the comparison is made, but I would like for us to stop comparing those two things, because nobody has to know if you have an abortion. Nobody has to know if you have this medical procedure. So if anything would be, it isn't the same. It's kind of apples and oranges. It is, and it is, but it isn't. It's good that we have legislation to protect, community members, but it's not the same. And so I'm going to leave it at that, and I'll, expound on that later. But for right now, I appreciate just leave that part alone.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Judy, let's go ahead and do a roll call on this one as well.
Yes, DeBoer Leonard.
Yes.
McQueen.
Yes.
Stokes.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
Couch.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is citizen concerns. So this is the part of the agenda where we would love to hear comments from anyone up to 3 minutes, and Judy will time those for anything that's not listed on the agenda. And do we have any citizen concerns? All right, Rebecca.
Rebecca Potter, a Yellow Springs citizen. I just want to take a minute to applaud all of you for taking that first step towards protecting a woman's right to her own body. And to also say that, as I think Carmen has affirmed, this will be a long fight, and there is a lot more that many citizens in this town want to see done. And also to speak to the people watching this meeting, that we will continue to work on those efforts. In the last week, countless number of people, from young to old, have been organizing, coming together, talking, waving signs, shouting, marching, to try to find a way that this community can move forward and empower women, everyone in this fight. So thank you for that. And I also know that on your agenda, you are looking at environmental issues. You're looking at how we can have a vibrant community. That's what makes Village of Yellow Springs a special place, and that I think is all connected. So thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Any other citizen concerns? Yes.
Jill Eggleston, resident, citizen of Yellow Springs. I'm extremely curious about Brianne's job. I've never talked to Brianne or met her, but at the last meeting, she brought up a couple times right at the end what the status of her job was, and she was blown off. And specifically, you just called for adjournment. So I'm concerned. You're interviewing for her position tomorrow. It seems, is she being forced out? Does she want to stay? So if you could answer that, that would be great.
All right, thanks, Jill. Yeah, so again, I think blown off is the wrong characterization. We had planned for interviews for 3 potential legal support, which included Brianne, and those folks weren't available. Again, I'm not sure why Judy's email wasn't, read by everyone, but I mean, I looked at it again and it was pretty clear to me. So I think Brianne wants to stay. She's presented us with a proposal, and so we're going to evaluate that along with everyone else. And I will say I've appreciated Brianne's legal support since she has been involved. I've been one of her biggest fans. So, but yeah, I mean, I will just say, whatever people were confused about at the end of the last meeting, it was very clear that we wanted to interview all 3 potential village solicitors at the same time. They weren't available, and I'm sorry that everyone didn't read that message. So.
Well, it wasn't clear when you were watching it. That's what I'm saying.
Sure, I agree.
When you watched it, it wasn't clear.
Yeah. And unfortunately, yeah, and thank you for that. It was not clear, and I realized after the fact, I honestly assumed that everybody read what Judy's update was. So, and in the future, we'll not assume that. Thank you. Any other citizen concerns? Lindsay.
Hi, Lindsay Burke, resident. I had a couple of things that I wanted to talk about, but I think maybe some other people will bring them up, so I'll just touch on this one. About a month ago, there came up in a meeting that there was credit card issues and that the state auditor had been here, and then all of a sudden we didn't have a finance director. And I'm still waiting on public records requests from that. And it was on the agenda at one point that I believe Josue was supposed to talk about Matt Dillon's resignation, and then we didn't hear about it in that meeting. And then I asked at the last meeting what had gone on with Matt Dillon, what was the update, what's going on with the finance director, what's going on with the credit card issue. And I don't think we've seen any transparency on that so far. So I'd like to re-ask that question.
Okay, thanks, Lindsay. Was it on the agenda?
It was, and it was covered. It was in petitions and communications, and you said Matt Dillon has tendered his resignation. His letter is attached, and that was that.
Yeah, and our understanding is that, as the paper, I think accurately reported, Matt's moving on to greener pastures for him, and we're happy for that. Otherwise, we're not going to get in depth, but I've been very open about the auditor's inquisition and the issues. I will emphasize are pretty. I don't know. They're a stretch, but. Where did you hear about that? I talked to John Hempfling about it. I think he's supposed to write something about it. But anyway, I'm happy to talk about the 5 issues. So there's nothing in my mind that needs to be a secret, and they're everything from someone accidentally using the wrong credit card and ordering unicorn snot, which they paid the village back for. There's the issue around recognizing John Gudgel that ended up being some issue, which there was no problem. In my mind, there was the issue around Josue working outside of the office for a week during COVID, which is something that we approved. But anyway, I'm happy to run through those issues because all of them were, in my mind, really silly. And I'm not exactly sure who decided to make them an issue, but there's nothing to hide on those. And so, but I've definitely talked with John about it, and I'm happy to run through them as well, but I won't do that right now. But those are some examples of things that that came up that. Could I just get that in the folder? Sure.
Get which?
What you're itemizing the list, there was one thing I was asked about. I was getting a village vehicle, and I would fuel up the car with my Visa, fill up the car with my Visa, and so that was part of the investigation as well.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'll say I was particularly shocked that the state auditor basically said, how can you believe that Josue is working those hours when literally I get calls from Josue every hour, and they were basically, deciding how we should manage the village, and it just didn't make a lot of sense. But anyway, yeah, I mean, I've been pretty happy to talk about those issues. So because nothing that came up was anything criminal, and I don't really know what the motivation was for whoever, contacted the auditor. But yeah.
Just to be clear, we don't know who contacted the auditor. Right. What I was told was an anonymous citizen complaint.
Yep. So, and I know there's calls for more reports to the auditor, but I mean, the reality is you're not going to find anything. So, I mean, we all do this because we love the village. So, but I do want to follow up on that because it shouldn't be a mystery, and really those issues were pretty silly. Jessica.
Sorry. Jessica Thomas, Yellow Springs News. So just for clarity and to get it on the record, when can folks who have made public records requests expect to receive those?
Can I just address that? There are some folks who got their records requests almost immediately because of the way that they requested those records, and because when they were asked to narrow them, they immediately narrowed them. There are other folks who made these pretty broad requests, which are fulfillable, but which every single one of the emails that they requested, stretching back to, I don't know, it's months of emails, everything containing a reference to credit card from Dylan to Samaran and vice versa for the last however many months. Now all those have to be redacted, all those have to be gathered. That request is going to take a really long time. Whereas the individual who just said, can you just give me the emails where they're talking about the jewelry purchase because that's what I want to know about, got his things in about 3 hours. So it depends on what you're requesting and how you request it. We cannot just assume, oh, you're looking for that item and say, here's the one thing you want, because then the accusation is, nope, you cherry picked, you didn't do what I asked, and I asked you for all of these other things. So either way, you kind of get vilified, but think hard about how you make your request. If there's a specific thing you're after, ask for the specific thing. I am happy to get you the specific thing. It's way easier than redacting 94 emails for a request that's going fishing. So that explains why some people got their things fairly quickly and other people are still waiting on redactions and things to go through the solicitor to come back to me to get handed out, and that's how it works.
And there's some things that we don't have, right? My call logs were public record and I couldn't get them from Verizon. I had to go through some security team and needed a subpoena, and we had to speak with a few other folks to get it, and we may have something today.
To that point, another thing that I wanted to ask about was, I remember that at one point council voted to give Judy $5,000 to help with public records requests, and I was wondering where the status of that. Are you getting the help that you need, or are you using that $5,000?
It's pretty difficult to find somebody who wants to come in and redact, because first of all, they need to know how to redact, so they need to be a professional, usually someone who's got a legal background. $5,000 is a pittance to do, however much redaction they would need to do and get up to speed on all the village things. They would know exactly how to do the redactions. It's really not worth it. To me, I'd much rather have the requester narrow the request. Just let's make it doable instead of, do you really want 2,500 records, or is there a thing that you really want to find and you can specifically kind of address what that is or what you're looking for, because then we can do that.
Sure. Okay, so the $5,000 for an assistant isn't probably going anywhere.
I'd have to do a search. I'd have to find a person. Oh, gee, don't have time for that. It's a pretty specified niche, and we did ask. There were queries went out to various sources, and we got a big zero back. It's just not it's not something other folks have done. It's all done in-house for most people.
Great. Thanks, Lindsay. Yeah, I also just want to reiterate that anytime somebody asked me about these things, and again, John Hempling and I had a detailed discussion about the state auditor inquisition. I'm happy to talk about it because there's literally nothing to hide. Jill?
So John's not here, otherwise I'm sure he would expound on it. But did everyone buy something on the card? Was that the issue? Or, because it just seems like you're not saying what you bought. You were like, he bought this, he bought this.
So our understanding was that it was a council card that Judy was holding. So there was a lack of clarity around what the policy was. So when we recognized John Gudgel for his 10 plus years of service, because I was able to go pick up the key to the village, took the credit card from Judy, went and picked it up, gave it back to her. That was the credit card issue. Otherwise, every other time that any purchase for council has been made, we asked Judy to do it. So that was one where I was available to drive down to Centerville and pick that up.
With that particular transaction, there was an allegation that there was no requisition put into the system for that. There was a requisition put into the system for that purchase. So, we've been checking things off as the process has started. And I don't know that that's what kicked off this whole thing. That's just one of the things that we were asked for. I was asked about a refrigerator that was purchased. And the auditor said, where is this refrigerator? And I just happened to be in a staff room, and I looked back and I said, it's right there. And
well, the best one is, what's the Shutterfly thing? All right, so one of them was because Josue did not transfer his coupon for Shutterfly for something he bought at Best Buy, that was something that was flagged. So, and I don't know if anyone else uses their Shutterfly coupons, but anyway, I mean, this is the kind of stuff.
So context to that, when we transitioned to online streaming, we had to do system upgrades. We bought a lot of cables, we bought some camera, we bought a video converter that's attached to this system that allows us to stream to Zoom and everybody looking, and we can throw our videos up on the screen and be able to do all of these things. I made a purchase of, I think it was a little over $1,000. I didn't look at the receipt that Best Buy for certain purchases gives you this free Shutterfly purchase. I don't use Shutterfly. It was attached to the receipt. So I had to stay, what did I use these things for? And I didn't. I don't print out photos.
I'm wondering if there's another way to handle it. I mean,
Yeah.
I can tell you that if you're really concerned about this stuff, look at the state and look at the federal government, because we are so scrutinized.
No.
And if this is really a very serious issue, which it isn't, but if people think it is, then maybe we need to have some kind of written report. And the thing about employees and contractors, I think that council meeting is not the place to talk about why an employee is leaving or how they performed, or that is confidential, and that's not appropriate in this setting. And I would like, I'm not finished,
right?
I am not finished. And I would like to, that maybe there's some kind of report. Would you like a report, a written report? Okay, then could we have some kind of written report? If that's appropriate, I don't know if it's appropriate to give these details. These are the 5, or maybe Brianne, these are the 5, this is what Judy spent accidentally and she repaid, and this is what Josue did when he was at home working, and this is how Brian took the credit card because we didn't know there was a policy. I mean, let's start focusing on something that matters, like the abortion thing, rather than digging into something that isn't there. And I think our attorney would like to say
I understand,
something.
but I just need to respond because I was going to ask another question. I understand.
This is not, the purpose of this is not to stand up and have a discussion with council. You come up, you ask your question, you take your 3 minutes, and then if there's a response, we should get back to you. And I'm recommending that we do that. This is not a discussion
I
back and forth.
understand that. I didn't use my 3 minutes, so I'm just going to use my last minute and a half to say that I know you guys think it's funny and you're blowing it off, but when you have someone call the auditor, the finance director resigned, and I own a home here and I pay taxes, so of course I'm going to be concerned about where my tax money goes. It's not a laughable issue. That's why I'm just bringing the question.
And just
it's a citizen concern.
Thank you.
No one up here is laughing. It was absolutely demoralizing, demeaning, and horrible. I got grilled for 2 hours. You can look at what I make per year, and I can tell you it's not enough to put up with that kind of dehumanizing treatment. It was not okay with me, and I'm not laughing.
Okay.
Just for the record.
Really quickly, I would like to interject. I would like to interject really quick. I mean, I'm going to take my time. I'm starting now. So calling something, just because something is not important to you, or it doesn't mean that it's not important to someone else.
That's right.
So saying that something is not important is dismissive.
That's right.
So that's all I'm going. That's all I'm going to say there. It's important that we can have this discourse without it deteriorating into something personal.
And there was laughter, not from Judy. I understand Judy's passionate,
Right.
but there was laughter as well, and that was part of this dismissive.
Right.
But
So,
to Mary Ann's point, there will be a written report. It will come from the state auditor's office, and it is premature to characterize anything as silly when the auditors have not said what the results of their investigation are yet. That investigation is still open. We've had a public records request for the records that were provided to the state auditor's office. To Judy's point, she's absolutely on point. If you can narrow the request for a specific record, you'll get it faster than saying, I want anything and everything. But there will be a written report. That is not something that we control the timeline for. That is up to the state auditor's office.
Okay, thanks, Brianne. And I guess I would say, go back and watch the video. Like, laughing is different from like sort of highlighting like how ridiculous something is. And so I understand Brianne's legal perspective, but when several of us were interviewed for 2 hours about things like unicorn snot and, you know, shutterfly coupons, I mean, think about you being in that position. So anyway, okay, any other citizen concerns? Laura.
I have some macro comments. Laura Curlis, resident and a former council member and former village manager. I mainly want to talk to Carmen and Gavin because you have not been on council that long. But the view from 10,000 feet is we just have had a resolution approving finance director's 2023 tax budget. Now, we haven't had a finance director on the job for 2 weeks. Right? So exactly whose tax budget is that? Now, the reason you have a finance director is to provide some level of a check and balance on the other actors in government, including council members, including the village manager, including the president. So the finance director is a check and balance, and they're a very important part of this government. They're so important, as a matter of fact, that in a statutory form of government, they're an elected position. They're essentially your village auditor. And so also, as is the village solicitor, so important it's a check and balance, not to be governed by or hired by some other unit of government. See, these are the checks and balances. I'm not a fan of this council manager form of government for this reason, never have been. Didn't like working under it because I think those checks and balances are missing. So that's one thing, is whose tax budget is it really? We've lost 2 finance directors in about 2 years. I would say that's a systemic problem, not a personal problem, except in a rare case. And I knew both those people, and I thought, you know, who knows, even you don't know everything about what they do, but I thought they were conscientious, honest public servants. Maybe not perfect, but why didn't we keep them? I'm suggesting there might be something systemic going on. Cash reserves, Gavin and Carmen, you maybe never heard my speech. You know, I've worked in their governments that a year's worth of cash reserves in local government is what you strive for. Why is that? It's because if you try to pass a levy and it fails and you aren't able to fund your government, you have at least 1 or 2 more cracks to get it done, to tell the people and convince them why they should vote for your levy. When you have 90 days cash reserves, that's not long enough. So I'm just suggesting that you think about building those cash reserves back up. And my last question is, does workers' comp cover council people who have accidents in the building? And Brian, I'm talking specifically about yours. I wondered why workers' comp isn't covering you. And then did workers' comp, because council people are workers, we're employees. And then why? Yeah, but we're on the payroll. Are we covered by workers' comp? That's my question. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Laura. And we're not, right? No. Okay. All right. Any other, Sarah?
Wait,
Yeah. Sarah?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Gavin.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Can I just ask one? I was expecting to discuss the budgets more in the process that you talked about. So just know that, Laura, for whatever it's worth, that was my expectation. Just, do you mind, in terms of the cash reserves, do you know what the number of days is based on the current reserves?
Yes. So it's at 51%.
Okay.
Cash reserves.
And by the way, the state recommends 90 days. So Laura has always indicated that she's in opposition to that, but we are above the state requirements. Sarah.
Sarah Sinclair Amen, resident. You should probably call the Bureau of Workers' Comp because you guys are employees, by the way, under the state law. So first, as part of the investigation that Councilmember Stokes recently worked on, I would like President House to clarify on record why he was asked to resign and was ultimately terminated in February 27th, 2022 from the Yellow Springs School District. Then, I would like Councilmember Stokes to give the specific reason that you decided that Council President House was promoting a news article that falsely stated that the recent Aubert development was an affordable housing development, was not a public official using false information for political gain, especially when accurate articles were available, including the Yellow Springs News. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Any other citizen concerns? Yeah, I'm not sure we're going to answer those, but if Kevin wants to follow up. Any other comments?
Well, I'll just say this. I'm not going to speak to the Yellow Springs school situation, and I will send you a note.
I would like it on the record. It's important that it's on the record.
We'll put it in the packet. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I think we're moving into special reports, and we have, John Fee, you have a citizen concern? Yeah. All right, got to let me know.
John Fee Jamra, citizen of the earth. I'd like to also know what, I'd like to have a report also about what happened at the school. I thought that was kind of dismissive there. My concern is to the other members of council. I'm not coming for you, Brian, because I'm already coming for you. The people are coming for you. Which is, what are you going to do moving forward from this day to help this man? Aside from Carmen and Gavin, the record will show the rest of the council members and staff have been covering for this man and enabling him with his obvious problems that keep him from being a DEI representative of government. So my question is to you, Josue, and Marion, and Kevin, and staff. What are you going to do to help this man and his overtly and covertly obvious problems? Because this isn't even poor leadership on your part. It's an omission. It's an omission of leadership, which makes all of you poor leaders. So that's my concern. And I want to know, what are you going to do moving forward to help this man?
Okay. All right, so we're going to move into special.
I would like to say something.
Please do.
And this is my opinion, and it's not going to be well received. I think this is a witch hunt. I don't think that someone's personal medical, just like Carmen was indicating, personal medical issues are something that need to be aired publicly. Yeah. So just a minute. That's just what I said. Did you not hear me?
We're not talking about a medical issue.
Oh, you're okay. Well, then maybe I don't know what you're talking about. But I know that there are some medical issues that I don't think need to be revealed to other people. I do think this is a witch hunt, and I'm supporting Brian by being on this council with him. And that's my answer to you.
That's not helpful.
And I will continue to do that.
That's not helpful.
Okay, so I think we're ready for our Power a Future Clean Ohio presentation. And yeah, all right, good timing. Come on up, guys. Well, I tell you what, like while we're setting up, let's take a few minute break. Is that,
Okay.
is that,
Okay, I was just going to say who they were.
yeah, well,
Let's do that after the break.
Is it going to take?
yeah, all right, yeah, let's take a 5-minute break.
You guys got all these.
All right, so we're back.
Yes.
Yeah.
Before we proceed to the next presentation, Joe, I won't take up much more time. There were two statements said that I feel compelled to provide a response, because I think it's important that you know the jurisdiction or the authority of certain actions you're taking. So you approved the finance director role, and with Judy, I discussed keeping the title because it had already been published in that way, but the authority of the budget by charter, by the village charter, is designated to the village manager. So the village manager is the fiscal officer as designated in the charter. I spoke with the Greene County auditor just to make sure that we were above board on our proceedings on this. And he confirmed what I understood our charter to say, that this is the village manager's responsibility. So as council approves it, we would then send it off to the county auditor. So we don't need to make an appointment for a finance director or fiscal officer to submit this, because our charter already designates the village manager as the authority to submit this. So I want to make sure that you are all aware of that. So if you have any doubt about what you approved. The second piece, that the statement about a systemic problem, because we've had two finance directors move on in a short period of time. Both of the finance directors served their 2 years, and they're moving on to other things. I'll also point out that in 1 month, I will be the second longest serving village manager in 22 years. And that includes Laura Curtis's tenure. So I want to put those things in perspective.
Thank you.
That's another systemic problem, by the way, if you look at the tenure. Thank you. That's the end of my comment. Thank you very much.
Okay, Joe.
All right, I'll begin. Good evening. My name is Joe Flaherty, and I'm a resident of Westerville, Ohio, but I'm here representing a statewide organization and coalition called Power Clean Future Ohio, which Yellow Springs joined last year, and I'm very excited to have you as part of this great network of local governments. So you can see on this slide here, and we'll run through a few slides just to give you a quick rundown of resources that we provide. I want to make sure you all have that update to understand what you can access through our organization and through our resources. And then after I finish presenting, make sure to answer any of your questions. I'll hand it over to my colleague, John Paul DeVersa with Unpredictable City, who's part of our technical assistance team, to give you a little background on renewable energy credits, a very fun, wonky energy topic that I'm sure you all will dive into and hopefully have some good questions for us so we can help inform you all as you make decisions on this issue. So with that, I'll go ahead and jump right in here to talk a little bit about PCFO. So we launched in February of 2020. So as you can imagine, it was a great year to launch a new initiative, but we kept our head above water. And over these next few slides, what I'll ask, if you don't mind, is just cycle through just slowly here over these next few. You'll see a whole variety of different organizations that are involved in this work. And they all come at it from different angles. Climate change is going to affect all of us. It's going to affect us all differently. Some are going to experience the brunt of this issue in a whole different way. And so we want to make sure we're centering equity in our work, and we do that by making sure that our coalition is representative of this issue. But it also reflects a whole variety of ways in which we can think about this work. There's economic development considerations to think about, new jobs, making sure that folks are trained for this work, have access to those opportunities. The environmental and public health implications of this are incredibly worrisome for the very coming years, but also will impact generations to come. We also know the financial implication of this. We'll soon be launching a report on the municipal costs of climate change called The Bill is Coming Due, because we know the climate impacts are going to affect local governments and the infrastructure you all need to support, your budgets, what those look like in 10, 20, 30 years. They're going to continue to be influenced by the climate impacts we all face. So we're really fortunate to have that great coalition of organizations doing this work. And they all come to try and help partner with local governments that want to think about what clean energy investments can we make? What are real actions we can take today to reduce our emissions, to create a more equitable clean energy economy for all of our communities? We also know there's a lack of leadership at the state level and certainly not enough action at the federal level. So while it may not be the most obvious way to approach this work, I actually think it's the best way. If we can do this locally, we can do this globally. So let's think about what solutions make sense for you all, and I'll underscore this. throughout any conversation I have with any community and along with all of our other partners is that we want to make sure what you all want to do is centered in this work, making sure that we best serve your interests. And so we provide those resources, but ultimately you all are calling the shots and trying to figure out how to make this work for Yellow Springs. And so we can certainly help educate, help provide the right partners, the right experts. And at the end of the day, want to make sure that you feel confident in the decisions you're making, but also that you have the resources. Over the past 2.5 years, we've seen an incredible number of communities join in this effort. So you'll see up on this slide, a whole list of communities listed here. We now have 32 communities that have joined Power Clean Future Ohio, and they range across this entire map. It's large cities, it's villages, it's counties, every corner of the state, all with different ways in thinking about this issue and all approaching it different ways as well. So some folks are thinking about this and how much renewable energy can we adopt for our community? How many electric vehicles can we have within our local fleet? Or how many can we see rolling on our streets? How many charging stations do we have access to? How do we make sure that low-income housing has the best, most energy-efficient technologies available to those residents? There's all kinds of ways that you can approach this, and some are saying, I want to do it all. And so we want to make sure you have the resources to think about all those issues. If you can go on to the next slide. You'll see here just the different ways I mentioned, all the different angles that we approach this issue with. Reducing emissions through local policy action, that is really what drives this approach. You know, I don't have one specific interest in a particular technology or industry or any of those things. It's all about what sort of levers can you pull, what technologies can you help bring into your community that can help reduce emissions, improve air quality, improve the livelihoods of your community members. We want to make sure we're implementing equitable energy policy. We know the history of this issue. Communities have been left out, people have been silenced, and as a result, their health has suffered, and that continues to be a problem we face on a day-to-day basis. Where do we site energy projects? How do we go about this work? So we want to make sure anything we're recommending to you is equitable, that we think about those that experience your community in different ways, and how is that impacting them? That's not always easy. It's something you have to work through, right? You got to think about all the different angles on this. We can help provide you with some models, some other recommendations. How have other cities done it? Where have they seen success? Finally, it's about reducing costs. Let's think about how we can make this palatable for local governments to adopt. You know, you don't have a bottomless budget, so how can we make sure that we're figuring out the solutions that are out there that can help you save money? And we also come at a unique moment right now where the economics around this issue line up. The price of solar has gone way down. The price of wind has gone way down. We'll see more and more electric vehicles rolling off the lines of electric vehicle or car manufacturers more generally because it's better technology and it will help save us money and ultimately save us on emissions as well. How we do that is we provide technical assistance. So we provide, if you want to go to the next slide, this is a quick rundown. When we first launched, we did not have all these resources available. When you all joined, we didn't have all these resources available. And it's been a fast 2.5 years of trying to bring as much as we can to the table to help enable, to be a catalyst for local governments who say, my residents care about this, my community cares about this, local businesses care about it. How do we make it happen? Well, we do know that there's some things that can help us get there. They can act as catalysts, help us embrace this change, to do the planning work. And so you'll see here just a few examples. A tree canopy assessment. Understand where your trees are in your community, who has access to that green space, and what are the equity implications of having trees in your neighborhood. A greenhouse gas inventory. If you want to reduce emissions, you got to know where to start. Where are your biggest source of emissions within your community? Having that assessment is a really good first step to understand, okay, if I want to set a emission carbon reduction goal of 50% by 2030, below 2010 levels, what were my emissions in 2010? What were they in 2020? Where am I at, and how can I progress to make sure I get there? You'll see a whole variety of other things on here. I'll let John Paul cover a few of these things, certainly around enhancing your solar market, allowing residents to adopt rooftop solar. Energy efficiency programming obviously is a great first step for communities as well. I also want to underscore one at the top left there, which is the Infrastructure Grant Assistance Program, which we launched earlier this year. Fortunately, we saw Congress do something good for a change, and they passed an infrastructure bill, and we're going to see a historic investment at the local level of infrastructure dollars. Those are going to go, much of those dollars are going to go to clean energy projects. And we want to make sure that Ohio, our local governments, have access to those dollars. That takes planning, that takes prioritization, that takes some research. So we can do that work in partnership with you. So if there's a grant you want to pursue, and you don't have the staff capacity to do some of the grant writing or the grant editing, you need to work through some experts to say, hey, is this what they're looking for? Or if you're just at the beginning stages trying to figure out what grants match up for you, which ones might work for Yellow Springs, we can help figure that out, help identify those things. We've got a lot of great resources on our website to look at this particular resource as well. So with that, I'll move on to just a couple quick examples so you can see how some of this work is playing out in communities across Ohio. So we've got 3 examples just listed here, Canton, Toledo, and Dayton. There's plenty more to look to. We've done a tree canopy assessment for Canton, and that really helps get a good look at a community that's been around a long time, that's had a variety of different development over the years, to understand where they need to invest in their tree planting program. Toledo did an incredible thing where they passed within their budget a 1% for the environment amendment, which we've seen. Maybe 1% is not enough, right? But that is an incredible move by a local government where we've seen this model around 1% for the arts. They adopted this 1% for the environment to say, how can we invest in our capital improvements budget every year, programs that are specifically going to improve our environment. And in doing that, they also established a commission, an environmental commission, which has resident representatives, it has members of the local chamber, it has different representatives across the community to help understand where do we need to prioritize those investments. And finally, you see Dayton here, which has gotten some coverage on their, most recently, their community choice aggregation program through SOPEC, which is going to save residents money, which I know you all have a municipal utility, so not quite the same model to follow there. But we also did a greenhouse gas inventory. John Paul actually conducted that greenhouse gas inventory for them. And they identified that 14% of their emissions came from their local government operations, which is a good place to start, right? We don't have control over everything, but we certainly have control as a local government over what's under our roof, what's driving down our streets that we own. How do we make choices and put in policies in place to make sure that we're reducing that chunk of the pie? And then also for the rest of it, how do we help engage community members, local businesses to help drive down those emissions as well? I'll go to this last slide and then I'll wrap up and turn it over to John Paul. Right now we've launched a sustainability cohort, and Councilwoman McQueen has joined in on some of those meetings already. We've got another one coming up next week. And these are communities across part of the PCFO network that are looking at sustainability plans. How do we do this work in sustainability planning or climate action planning? How do we establish a goal? How do we engage our community? That's a big question that a lot of communities face. I think you all could probably help teach others on how to best do that as well. But I think this is a process that you can follow. You can identify, let's actually make that commitment. Maybe you don't commit to that number quite yet because you need some more information. But if you're going to make that commitment, put a plan together to actually do this work, identify those policy changes is where we can help figure out what's the world of possibility here, establish that baseline, engage your community. I think one of the most critical and most difficult processes in this work is putting that plan together, but then also hearing from residents what they want to see in it and making sure it reflects that. Educate and engage the local community as well. These issues can be weighty, they can be difficult to understand. So let's make sure we're also going through that process of not just saying, hey, what do you think about this? But here's how this works. Here's some background on it, and let's get your input. And then finally, when you develop that plan, get that, circulate it, get that input from there as well before you finalize and get to implementing. So with that, hopefully that's a good ground setting for you all to understand all the resources we have. You all, of course, can reach out to me individually. I've been in touch with individuals both on staff and on council previously, but I'm happy to engage individually or connect you with experts if you have questions. We really want to be an energy policy advisor for cities across Ohio that are trying to do this work. So with that, before I turn it over to John Paul, you can see my contact information up there if anyone wants to reach out. But I'll pause here to see if there's any questions about Power Clean Future Ohio before we dive into a conversation on renewable energy credits.
Give any kind of examples of how clean energy can be equitable, because clearly that I appreciate that is a value that you have, and we have that as a village, and that's something I think we're struggling with. And I don't know if you have any examples, but I think it's something that we'll want to be able to find out some ideas about.
Yeah, you all are in a unique spot, being that you have a municipal utility. to take advantage of community solar. And community solar is one of those opportunities that allows a group of residents to buy into a project. Not everyone can afford to put solar on top of their roof. That's part of the challenge we face in having widespread adoption of renewable energy is that can be difficult. But doing community solar is one option to do that, because you can bring down the costs of a project at a larger scale and allow more residents to have access to that renewable energy. We also know that renewable energy based near a community, in a community, also correlates with cleaner air. Cleaner air, more electric vehicle adoption, those cars driving up and down your street, everyone's breathing that air. There's an equitable aspect to this general work that I would underscore as well. And then finally, I think making sure that residents, equitable energy and clean energy policy means making sure that residents understand what's available to them. I think we sometimes forget to take a step back and say, who lives in my community? What resources do they have access to? Who actually lives here? And what sort of resources can we make sure they're aware of? So some of that may be government programs that allow them to access bill relief, accessing other sort of low-income budgeting opportunities for them as well, weatherization assistance programs. There's programs available out there that we just want to make sure that residents know about too. So I think that's another opportunity that I would embrace.
Previous slide, we had the 9 boxes up there, and just wondered if, in terms of the spectrum or those samples of things that you think we need to do, just wondered if you give us a grade. Where do you think our village is? Based on what you know about the village, where would you say we are in the program? I know we have a passing grade.
I will say, I think Yellow Springs is thinking about these issues at a level that 99% of Ohio municipalities are not there yet. You all are out in front on this, and I think it's commendable. There's certainly some areas where I think there's more work to do, and we can talk through some of those. I think putting together a comprehensive plan is really important. Planning allows us to address these really difficult, sticky issues. Climate change feels like we're on a clock, right? We've got to get this done 2030. We hear that number a lot. It's really not a cliff that we're going down. We're going down a hill, and we're going very fast. And the closer we get to 2030, the faster we go. And the terrain gets rougher. And so planning allows us to account for that upcoming terrain, allows us to think about these things. And it also allows us to pull in all of the different stakeholders and the equity issues we need to really address up front to make sure we're doing that. So I would say the Yellow Springs is really thinking about this in the right way. A comprehensive plan helps move us to that next level to really pull in a lot of different input and stakeholders into this issue that need to have their voice reflected in the work you all are doing.
And I think it's important that we don't rest on our laurels. I mean, that's great. That's a great bumper sticker. We are the 1% with respect to this. We said 99%. But again, we don't want to rest on our laurels. I think we want to take those words of encouragement as keep the momentum.
Thanks, Joe. All right, I will turn it over to John Paul.
Yeah, gotcha. Just for your own purposes. All right. Go to the. All right. Thank you very much for having us here this evening. As Joe mentioned, I'm John Paul DeVersa. I'm principal with Unpredictable City. I focus on the greenhouse gas inventory services, tree canopy assessments, education and training, all for a technical team at PCFO. Please, please, please take advantage of us whenever you need assistance with anything. There's a breadth of knowledge in this room. You're good. There's a breadth of knowledge in this room. So if it seems like I'm speaking very elementarily, I apologize. I'll try and pick it up. If I'm getting too deep, please stop me and ask a question. I'm happy to go as fast or as slow as you need me to. So just to do a little level setting, I'm sure all of you are aware, but the most conservative models for the impacts of climate change that we're seeing by mid-century freezing temperatures are going to be pretty rare in Yellow Springs. We'll be seeing the agricultural zone move from roughly a 6 to a 7. Annual rainfall, almost 2 more feet compared to 2010. Then the average temperatures in July, 81 to 82, we might already be there. So by the end of the century, we're looking at no more freezing temperatures in the winter. The agricultural zone borders on an 8. Annual rainfall, 5 feet to 7.5 feet more than 2010. And the average July temperature somewhere between 82 and 85. Again, these are the conservative models. There's one thing to say about models is they're usually in the ballpark. Things usually happen faster than they say they will. All of this leads to the things that worry us. So more flooding, more wildfire, our ability to be resilient, more vector-borne diseases because now mosquitoes get to live all year round, things along those lines. So that's why we're here today to talk about RECs. RECs are a powerful tool. As part of a larger strategy, they're an exceptionally powerful tool. So when we're talking about building decarbonization, the 3 things that we want to do are, number 1, energy efficiency, figure out how much we can do and go for everything that's economical. Number 2, go for on-site generation as much as it is economical, and then work towards decarbonizing the grid. And that's where RECs really come in. RECs can be those market signal that says, hey, we're willing to spend money on more renewables. We want to see them on our grid. So as you can kind of see, as you go on, as the grid decarbonizes, there's less and less need for RECs. And so this is part of a long-term strategy, yes, over the next 10 to 20 years. However, this is not an all-the-time thing. They will go away. We ideally will not need them anymore at some point. So real quick, the life cycle of a REC. Certified project produces 1 REC per megawatt hour. That REC is sold to the consumer. That consumer likely has an energy generation requirement or a gross emissions requirement. That owner can then swap the REC, or you might hear arbitrage, as a way to make a little money on the side. So basically you have a REC that's very valuable, you sell it, you buy cheaper RECs. Sure, y'all are aware of this. And then at the end, you either let the REC expire or you let the REC, or you retire the REC, at which point you can claim the energy savings and say we run on renewable energy or X% of renewable energy. The whole time, the electrons are going to whichever homes and businesses they need to go to. Next slide, please. All right, so just for clarification purposes, because offset gets thrown around a lot, we talk about how much emissions or how much energy a REC offsets, but just to differentiate them from a carbon offset. What the difference is, a REC, 1 megawatt of renewable energy, an offset equals 1 metric ton of CO2 or CO2 equivalent. So I bring this up because we're going to talk about goals on the last slide, and what I want you to understand is there are many avenues to get where you need to go. Some are better, some are worse, and this is all about helping you make the best choices for Yellow Springs. So if you want to say we run on clean energy, we support renewable energy development, RECs are really the thing you're going after. Likewise, if you have solar field, if you have solar on your municipal buildings, whatever it happens to be, you can produce RECs, and therefore RECs are the way to go. On the other hand, if you're really just concerned about saying you're zero emission or net zero emissions, offsets may be something you're interested in. Again, carbon capture facilities, those are the ones that can produce offsets. My guess is Yellow Springs does not have any, but just to tie it back to the tree canopy assessments that Joe had brought up, one of the parts that we do talk about within those assessments are the value of your tree canopy in terms of both carbon and dollar savings of avoided costs due to the impacts of climate change. Next slide, please. All right, another thing to consider, where are the RECs coming from? So there's a lot of different sources. Some are arguably renewable, some are definitely renewable. And of course, we all have our opinions. So if you disagree with me on any of these, that's fine. And I'm more than happy to hear you out. Solar, solar thermal, wind, geothermal, and hydroelectric facilities, these are all solidly renewable. The ones that are kind of worrisome in some ways, or some that you may want to give more consideration to, biomass. Biomass is a renewable resource. It is a carbon-intensive way to produce electricity. It also emits quite a bit of pollution in form of particulate matter. A biological derived methane gas is a really technical way to say renewable natural gas, which is something a lot of people are talking about, that typically comes from our wastewater facilities. Is it a good thing to capture that? Absolutely. You should absolutely be making sure that methane does not go into the atmosphere. Is it good for us to be building our systems based on that? That's where the questions come in. Landfill gas, same way. Is it renewable? Technically, yes. Do we want to be building our systems based off our waste system as well? Same with solid waste. Solid waste is a real tricky one. So one thing you can do with old tires is heat them up extremely high and make this thing called syngas. You burn that, you create electricity. Burning tires obviously is not a very renewable way. Is it burning waste? Is waste renewable? According to the law, yes. But many people would disagree with that. So I won't go into all of these. But however, so as you can see, there are some things that you want to consider a little more deeply about where RECs come from if you are going to purchase them. Question? You sure? Okay. All right, we'll go to the next slide. All right, and so, yeah, great time to kick up questions because now I have a bunch of questions for you. So mainly, there's really four main question headings that you want to think about. One, you're definitely on point with, and that's what is Yellow Springs' committed level of support? So are you putting policy behind it? Are you putting money behind it? Are you putting staff behind it? Do they have the right education level? Do they have the right experience to handle all of this? And then the other piece of that is, who are your partners in this? Do you have other municipalities on board? So that's pretty good. And I think the bottom three are the ones that are really we should bring to attention here. That's what is the goal? So what's the whole point of RECs? That's something that you really want to understand prior to going headlong and developing a policy behind it. Are you looking to reduce emissions? Is it your gross emissions? Is it your net emissions? Are you going to create a requirement behind that? And same with renewable energy. Are you going to require a certain level of renewable generation in your mix? RECs are a great way to resolve that. And so if that's part of the policy, that's something to make sure that you want to have in the front. And then also, are RECs a way for Yellow Springs to develop additional streams of revenue? It can be. Is that something you want to focus on? It's something to know up front. As I was saying before, where do our RECs come from? So are we producing them within the village? Is it enough? Is there more that we can be doing? Is that an avenue that should be pursued? Are there missing opportunities as well? As I was mentioning, what type of facilities do they come from? One major point to think about in this is that, are you purchasing RECs from additional facilities? Meaning, are they new facilities that otherwise wouldn't have been brought on board? And then where are these facilities physically located? So does it matter to you if they're in Ohio? Does it matter to you if they're on the PJM grid? Do you care where they come from? Then perhaps the most important part, how is Yellow Springs consuming RECs? So are you retiring them at the end? Or are you just planning on selling them again, in which case claiming those emission savings or renewable energy content is impossible? So another question is how you're consuming them helping you to achieve your goals? How is it supporting your other initiatives? So is it really sending those signals to the market? Because that's something you definitely want to be doing. Is there a way to have it help support energy efficiency or on-site generation? Are there other goals? Are there equity goals that you'd like to try and hit that could happen in combination with RECs? And then are you selling the RECs? Are you participating in REC swaps or arbitrage? Who are you selling to? Are those people who actually care about reducing their emissions? Are these people that are actively working towards that? Are they people within your region? Kind of all these different considerations, the whole ecosystem as well. So, and then just the last slide real quick, a bunch of resources. So if you want to dig into this more, again, more than happy to take questions right now. But I think between us and those last resources on the slide, we should be able to get most of the questions answered.
All right,
Cool.
thank you.
Okay.
Great. Yep, questions?
I had one. I saw you had fuel cells as questionable renewable energy. Is it the heat caused by burning off the hydrogen gas?
No, it depends where the hydrogen comes from.
Okay.
So if it's green hydrogen is when you take water, you use renewable electricity to split it.
Yeah.
Yep, electrolysis, bingo. And you create hydrogen and water, or hydrogen and oxygen, excuse me. Great thing. Where it gets questionable is your fuel cells are fuel agnostic. They don't really care what kind of hydrogen, whether it's green hydrogen, blue hydrogen that's made from natural gas, or gray hydrogen, which is made from, there's so many different colors of hydrogen that I lose track. However, yeah, the fuel cell itself is agnostic. So you may have something that says green hydrogen's going into it. Do you actually know that? Or how do you prove that? All of these things that you want to make sure. So that's where I say it gets questionable. Green hydrogen in a fuel cell, awesome, do it.
Okay.
I'm not splitting water.
Gavin?
So as I understand where we're at on RECs is that this is sort of a comment for us, because this is the only time we talk about it, is that we don't have a policy on what to do about RECs right now. And I think you all were brought in part to help us understand, and I hope this doesn't come out the wrong way, but you've asked a lot of the questions I think we're asking, but we need to have answers to the questions. So is what's being suggested that we would work with one or both of you on the process of creating a recommendation and sort of giving answers, or is there some other process that we would go through?
Well, I mean, I think the questions in that discussion are the questions that we need to ask. We have people in our community, LaSway, and some people that have been on the Energy Board and probably an Environmental Commission, and council members who have answers to those questions, and we can also use PCFO. But, I mean, I think that this is very complex, and it gets to what our values are, and we have to decide what our values are. So, and I don't know, I mean, in a way, it's very cool because we have to grapple with things, and that's how it is. I mean, you have to, is this more important or is this more important? And we have to ask those questions.
Okay, and I think I'm just trying to understand from a process standpoint, what, like that, who brings all the stakeholders together and
we
where
haven't made that decision.
Okay, so when do we make that decision?
I know Brian, I understand Brian is going to recommend that we create a policy, and I would like to recommend that we think about who we want to be involved in making that policy. I don't think it just should be council. I think we should have a task force that includes Josue and Johnny and Deward Headley and Bob Brecka and someone from EC, probably, a couple council people, something like that.
Yep.
Interact with.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, a good starting point in my mind is to look at Oberlin's policy, and then, you know, once we get something on paper, I know PCFO has said they'll give us feedback, and yeah, and I agree with Mary Ann's idea around the process, so. Cool.
Thank you.
All right, John Paul, Joe, thank you guys very much. And yeah, and you.
Can we have access to the slideshows?
I have a copy of it. And
All right.
Yeah, I'll forward on.
Yep.
All right, well, we appreciate your time, and also I hope you enjoyed our council meeting. So, okay. All right, next up.
Can I ask?
Yes.
So, Mary Ann, in Toledo, they have this Environmental Protection and Climate Resilience Commission. That's a cool name for the Environmental Commission.
I like the 1% thing.
Yeah, well.
All right, thanks. Okay, manager's report.
All right, tough act to follow. We are entering a period of some breaks for the weekends. We won't have another big event until August 4th, which is the Art on the Lawn. So we get a bit of a break. You guys get a bit of a break, but just remind you that Art on the Lawn is going to be in August. And I say that just because we've been so busy with events, Trail Days, Pride, 4th of July, so get a break. Going on to my manager's report, we've seen a decrease in the viral loads that we've been testing at the wastewater treatment facility. So which is good to see, because 2 weeks ago we were at the highest viral load that we had been in. And if you're considering this the early detection sign, it is in line with early detection because the Greene County COVID cases moved into the medium transmission rate. So we went from low, now we're seeing the outcomes of that spike. So we now are in medium community transmission. So I think the viral loads decreasing over the last 2 weeks reporting period, that I think we might be going back into the low transmission territory, just based on the wastewater testing that we're doing. So I don't know if you have any questions on that, and you've been following that.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to hear about the decrease, because I did notice the counties count going up, and I just wondered if that following week was going to be an opportunity for us to maybe retract some of the recent changes, but hopefully, again, we are seeing that leveling out.
Mm-hmm. And hopefully that trends continue where we'll go back into the low, transmission rate.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so, all right, we've talked enough about the public events. Lost in Place Apartments, we've had more applications come in today, so we have more applications than units available. So we're currently going through the income verification process. It's turning out to be somewhat challenging process, because the best practices is to have 3 times the income as an income guideline, so we can ensure that folks are able to financially support the rental cost of a unit. So we've had some folks need guarantors, so that's extending the process. But we wanted for council to know that, we're really going above and beyond, sort of doing our due diligence on this, and some folks will have guarantors. So I think it speaks to the level, the process that we put in, that we really create opportunities while also doing our due diligence work to make sure that the village is not taking on an excess financial risk, but we're also creating housing opportunities. So I don't know if there's any questions on the units.
So that's, I think what you're talking about is 30% of your income for housing, but I know, and I'm one of the people who spends more than 30% of my income for housing. So I have 2 questions. One question was, did you say you were requiring people who don't meet that criteria to have guarantors? And the other question is, are you looking at their past rental records to see if they have been able to pay equivalent amount in rent? Because that would be a pretty good indicator, I think.
Yes, we have. So the direct question to your first question, the answer to your first question is yes, we are asking guarantors. If there is a issue with a guarantor, we will take part of the guidelines. Best practices is to consider what they've been paying at another rental facility and getting some proof that they have been able to support a rental higher than 33% of their income. So we have not had to ask for such verification. Folks, when presented a guarantor option, they've taken that option, but we will consider that tool as an income verification tool. It hasn't been needed at this point. But did I answer both of your questions, Maria?
Yeah.
Okay.
Got it. So who does this? Like, is it like this is a unique thing, right? Like we don't have any other like property we manage in this context, right?
Right. So when you say who does this, we have procured the services of a platform called Rent Ready. So we try to keep as much information outside of our own databases. So we're going through a proven platform. The applicants go through a pre-qualification and an application process on the Rent Ready application. So they're providing all the information to the app. So they put in their social security, and the system runs the background check, the financial background check, and does that and gives us a score and a list of flags, if you will, if one is available or if there are flags present. There hasn't been anything that's come up in the application. So we're relying on a third-party platform that is the core business, property management. So there's an applicant portal where applicants are submitting their information, as well as the grantors are providing also their information for us to be able to do all the verifications we need to do for the applicants. The platform also does service tickets, so we will use the platform to manage service requests. If there's unit needs a repair and there's an issue, it will manage all the leases for us. So we'll upload the lease into it. They sign and it gets uploaded into the platform. So it's a solution for property management functions. It also has an accounting process. We are not going to use the accounting process because we have our own accounting systems. It has a payment receiving function, so folks can pay directly to the app and then it'll remit the money. A lot of our current tenants just come to the window along with when they come to pay the utility bill. So we'll continue to make that option. We want to save the residents money. So if they want to pay at the window, that's going to continue to be an option. There's a cost to receiving money on the app, on the platform, and that cost is typically passed on to the tenant. And I don't see why, if the tenants can pay at the window, why should they put to swipe a credit card or swipe a debit or checking account on the system? So, Kevin, did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, it's just interesting. Like, we're in property management now.
Yeah.
I mean, the app sounds like it does a lot of things, and someone will have to go actually physically fix the thing that the system can accept a request for.
Yeah.
So it raises a sort of interesting larger question about, if we have, for instance, this system, could a resident conceivably opt into the system if they wanted to provide affordable housing? Could they use the same requirements that we use, and then you have some economy of scale with access to the platform? Anyway, you don't need to answer that. It just raises larger questions about what we do as a village and whether or not it's a good role, or one we should expand, or one that we should look to change over time. I don't know where to talk about that, but that's the bigger picture I'm thinking about.
Yeah, those are all great ideas. I would say we have, I think of our work as there's people, there's financial resources, and there's technology. And that's the three pillars of my strategy to running the government. So we've got great people in place. So Erica has been assisting me directly on that process. And we look to get the best technology that we could financially support. And so we're leveraging all the resources as best as we can. You need any more questions? Okay, the survey for the police department is still out, it's still live. We've gotten some good feedback. We're going to have it out and open for a couple more weeks. And we'll publish the results once we close the survey. So if you're wondering, is that still going on? It is. We're planning to have it go on for maybe 2 to 4 more weeks. Right, on some administrative updates, I am reopening the position for the finance director role. We had several applicants. The pool of qualified individuals is too low for my preference, so we're going to open it up again. One of the criticisms or concerns we received back, and I've also done some compensation analysis, is that what we have traditionally budgeted as a village for that level of position is low compared to where labor market and where labor wages are right now. We're seeing the highest inflation that this country has seen in 40 years, so we need to adjust our compensation for this position. I'm looking by Friday's report, I put in 85,000, but to be more realistic, we got to give ourselves a little more room to attract top talent, and we have to be willing to go to up to 90. Obviously, any candidate that we hire will be compensated based on experience and skills and their ability to fit the duties of the job. I mentioned the sidewalk project prep begins next week. Cresco project still on hold. I had a very, very positive and encouraging meeting with TLT around our solar project, so that's a discussion that will continue, and it's great to have this conversation or this presentation today, because a key element to climate response activity is the decarbonization of our electric grid. And if you saw on that slide, a key element of the strategy is on-site generation. So we need more on-site generation. So that's how the Sun Farm solar field fits in the project. If we want to have meaningful impact, we need more on-site generation. Police department reports is in there. I would like to highlight how Ruth Peterson goes above and beyond the call of duty. She was getting off work one evening during the last 2 weeks, and one of our citizens had been calling regularly to a home check, because one of the services that we provide at police department is we do home checks. When someone's away from home, or officers will drive by and check that everything's okay on and around the home. And one of our residents called in very anxious. Her flight had been delayed after delays and had nobody to pick her up. And Ruth said, well, what time are you coming in? Picked her up, and that's what Ruth does. So I just want to highlight and recognize how our team goes above and beyond in their jobs. So, and there's plenty more in my report. I am open to taking questions.
All right, any other questions?
Thank you.
Yes, I did note the presentation earlier, talked about energy efficiency, on-site generation, grid decarbonization, and you just talked about Josue on-site generation with respect to the village and village-owned property. And this might be more of a further down the road, maybe with the Environmental Protection and Climate Resilience Commission conversation, but to what degree might we try to really encourage homeowners to embrace more on-site solar, rooftop solar in the homes?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So we've got about 100 homes with rooftop solar. I think that we may see another wave of rooftop solar because the credit is being phased out. So the economic incentives to do solar are going to be removed. So I think those that are really thinking about it, they're gonna see that their time to capitalize on these economic incentives is phasing out. So I think that we're gonna see more activity. There's also an economic pressure with inflation, difficult finding laborers to do installation. I think we're seeing a lot of those effects. I'm hopeful that things start cooling down now with rising interest rates, and so things will slow down and other folks might be able to jump in. However, the problem with high inflation and the way that the feds are controlling inflation is by raising interest rates significantly. So the folks that are going to be going into the marketplace for solar installation are going to be those of greater means to be able to support a higher interest loan or have their own capital to come in. So I think we're facing difficult challenges around more residential solar. There has been some relief. John Paul and Joe mentioned some of the infrastructure money that's becoming available. Part of that infrastructure bill, well, not directly tied to it, but one of the energy policy changes that Biden made recently was to hold off on the tariffs for panels being made in Asia. That includes China, Vietnam panels. And so I think that's going to allow more panels to come into the marketplace, and that's going to have an impact on price. Mm-hmm. That tariff hold is supposed to last 2 years. So I think in the next 2 years, as things cool down, we may see more residential solar. Obviously, we as a municipal government, as a municipal enterprise, we're also open to continuing our collaboration with the local cooperatives or solar cooperatives and solar purchasing groups to explore opportunities to bring in more solar generation opportunities.
Great, thank you, appreciate that.
Yeah.
Do you want to mention the swimming for all?
Yes, so we have swimming for all. We're running a little low on cash. I've reached out to folks for donations. I have a tentative commitment from 2 folks, so I'm going to follow up and try to collect on that. Right now, the shortfall that we're looking at is $1,250. And just so you get an idea of how that number comes about, Sam has the authorization to provide passes at free or reduced cost for eligible families. So at times, they will be half the cost or something less than that. And so we just tally that up as foregoing the revenue, and we actually set aside an expense account to make up for those funds. So we're running a bit short on 1,250, and as I mentioned previously, I'm going to look to try to fundraise some of that money, and if I'm not able to fundraise all of it, I'll come back to council and ask for a generous contribution.
And how do people donate?
Multiple ways. One is you could write a check to the Village of Yellow Springs, drop it off at the utility window, and put on the memo line, Swim for All. We also have a fund with the Yellow Springs Community Foundation that you can donate through and just designate it as for the Swim for All program or the pool fund, and that makes the funds, brings the funds to us.
Great. All right. Yeah, well, I definitely will be donating, and it's a great program. So
yes, it is. And yesterday, I don't know if you guys had a chance to stick around after the fireworks, but the pool was packed. I saw Brian earlier today getting a suntan, but the night crew was.
Well, I already learned last year. We called it a pool of hormones. So yeah, it's definitely
It's
for
a lot of young people.
A lot of young people.
Yes, that is the demographic.
But it is fun. Okay, so we don't have any old business. On new business, we are not going to do the Finance Committee update, primarily because some of the details which we were talking about having in the packet are not in there. But I will just give a preview that this is related to Finance Committee, and Josue has been talking about some of the challenges we're going to have moving forward related to shortfalls in the budget, lack of property and income tax revenues, and some of the things that we need to start thinking about. So look forward to that at the next meeting.
And Brian, if I may add, when I came on board, one of the things that council was very concerned about was affordability. And so I looked at all the cost management initiatives we could, and we've really driven up a lot of operational efficiencies and effectiveness. We've done a good job of securing grant money to get some of our project done. And so with all those strategies, we have not made any rate adjustments in our budgeting process, because we've been looking at other ways or utility rate adjustments. Given where the market is going, inflation being over 8%, all of our costs are rising. Just to give you an example of how much things how much costs have increased, the grant that we received for $1.2 million to replace all of our 2-inch galvanized pipe, when we submitted that grant application and we estimated that project, $1.2 million was enough to replace all of those lines. What we're finding out now that we have the grant and we're repricing things, we're going to be lucky if we're able to do a third of that project. That's how bad it is. And so that's just on this special project. When we're looking at chemical expenses to treat water at the water treatment facility or the wastewater treatment facility, or even at the pool, our costs have increased significantly. So as part of our budget planning, we were looking at new housing units come online, and we were anticipating what potential revenue that could be on the utility side, on the property tax side, on the income tax side. And now we know that those we can't count on those financial projections, that those projects aren't going forward. So we have to look at the entire picture, and that's what the Finance Committee started to look at our last meeting. We were not just focused on this area of the budget. No, we're looking at the big picture. What is happening within the organization and how much we need to support every function of the organization, but also what's happening in our community. So if you might have read the news that Miami Township is looking at an operational levy to support firefighters and EMTs. We know the schools have an expiring levy this year, and they also have needs for more funding for improvement projects and replacement projects. So we were looking at, the Finance Committee is really taking a global view. As we do our assessment, we're also going to be engaging with other political subdivisions to have those conversations. So I'm having the conversation with Don and Terry about funding that's affecting all three of us. So the management team is getting together, and we'll also bring in other representatives. But for the rest of council members and for the audience watching us tonight, the Finance Committee this year is really looking at the big picture, not just our own finances, but what's the tax burden on all our community, what money other entities need, and how do we get all of our things done.
So related to that, and Josue kind of alluded to it, because the Development Corporation is not having these conversations, which it was originally designed to do, we're talking about having a joint meeting. And we've talked about that before, but I think whatever we do, we need to think about, as Josue said, the implications of other cost of living aspects going up. So anyway, it's not going to be a conversation to look forward to, but it's an important one. Okay, so then the other item of new business is, Mary Ann, your proposals around policy.
Yeah. Yes, I have two proposals, two motions that I would like to make, and I will do them separately in the order of the document that I submitted. So the first is, I would like to make a motion that council empower the Environmental Commission to work with staff to develop a policy on the use of herbicides and pesticides on village-owned properties.
Okay, any discussion?
Yeah, we have to have a second, all right?
Oh, was that a motion?
Yes, I said I made a motion.
Okay.
So the motion is to move this forward. Okay.
I second.
Okay. All right. Discussion.
So I would like to explain a little bit further. As far as I know, there is at this point no policy. There was the, I guess, unwritten assumption that the village government was not going to use herbicides or pesticides. And I think that's pretty much has been the practice. And I know Nadia Malarkey did workshops with staff on more natural methods, which were met with mixed success. It's my feeling that there are times when it is appropriate to use limited amounts of herbicide. And I'll give two examples. One that I've been involved in, when we cut down the invasive species at the glass farm, the Bradford pear and the honeysuckle, we worked with Tecumseh Land Trust to apply, really essentially, it's Roundup on the stumps. Had we not done that, we'd still be trying to remove those species. So there are human resource reasons, financial resources, and environmental reasons, I think, to sometimes use herbicide. Another, Johnny brought up, when they put the telephone poles in the ground, if they apply herbicide to the pole or right around it, it extends the life of the pole. So yes, minimal amount of herbicide is being used, But if we save a tree 10, 20, however many years, that's an environmental trade-off that I think is worth it. So those are two examples of things that, and I'm sure there are others, but I think a policy could help staff know when they can, when they can't, and I think that the Environmental Commission and staff can work together to do this.
Kevin?
Well, yeah, it certainly seems reasonable, and it certainly seems like the Environmental Commission would already have, I think, the wherewithal to propose language, that might become legislation. And I guess I am interested in the questions, Marion, that you raised about what happened back when the village decided to not use herbicides in certain cases. And the question you asked was whether there was legislation at the time or how it actually happened. And if it happened in a certain way, do we have to unwind that? So again, it certainly seems reasonable that this is the kind of work that the Environmental Commission should be doing, but I guess I don't know why we need to not just accept a proposal of language to be considered for legislation.
Well, I think that it's not just the Environmental Commission do this. We have to work with staff. Staff knows the situations, not the Environmental Commission.
Because the last time the context where at least Mary Ann and I thought there was some kind of policy in place was when Patty was here, and it was related to our properties that we were renting out to farmers. And so there was this idea that we, would have them not use pesticides. But there was some pushback about that, I do remember, and about whether it was practical or not. But I think the bottom line is it has been more of an unspoken, like, this is the practice we want, but there's no teeth. So. Okay.
The no teeth piece, we've done a really good job at managing a lot of the invasive species with minimal, if not, with the example that Mary Ann gave, using at the riprap for a glass farm, that was a necessary piece. But most of our stuff, we're not dosing the pool with whatever was applied on the pool.
Right. And I agree. I think we've done a good job, and we've kept that in mind. So
what I think I hear, Mary, and correct me if I'm not accurate, I'm all over the place, is that we just need some solid policy regarding when and how much, what type, just some solid policy, something written that that people have to refer to ensure that we're clear on how we're going to move forward as a village regarding pesticide and herbicide use. Is that right?
On village-owned property.
On village-owned property.
And I think it's more effective if council directs the Environmental Commission to work with staff rather than the Environmental Commission just saying, oh, okay, let's develop a policy.
Okay.
You are right. You're right.
Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry, you're going to say something? Okay, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say Johnny's got his hand up. He wants to say something.
Johnny.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, so I understand Mary Ann's point about us working with the Environmental Commission, but we have actually been doing that since I've been here, since 14. Actually, just Mary Ann was talking about it. We actually proposed all the poles for treatment. We had the calculation of treatment, and we was actually told that we could not treat the poles. We actually had two presentations because the first one that we presented to them, the Environmental Commission did not like, so we come back with a more expensive approach, but still cheaper than replacing the poles. And the Environmental Commission turned us down again. Therefore, we did not treat no poles the last 2 years, and it was better to replace them. The other thing that they sent back was look at composite poles. I'm looking at cost long-term putting the same chemical back in the poles that's in the poles, helping prevent it. And then talking about Ellis Pond directly, it was taken directly to the Environmental Commission. Marianne was copied on the emails. And then it was, the Environmental Commission said, we don't know enough about this, consult a pond expert. Now we've consulted a pond expert. We've secured the chemicals to have an expert do it. And now all of a sudden we're trying to create a new policy to stop staff from doing what we do and consulting the experts and going to the Environmental Commission. And now we're trying to create a policy where the Environmental Commission's got to work with staff, but the staff has always worked with the Environmental Commission. So I don't understand what the policy's for when we're already doing it. We're being told no, but we're also not spraying. And this is only 2 items that I know of that I've ever brought to Environmental Commission because we don't spray.
Right.
Really, I like.
Thanks, Johnny.
Really quickly.
Yep.
Thanks, Johnny.
I appreciate hearing from you. So this is precisely the reason why we need policy. So you and your people aren't burdened with whatever comes about from a lack of communication or miscommunication, and not something that's written clearly, clear policy that's written so that it can be referred to and we can follow it. And I think that if that were to happen, we wouldn't be revisiting the same issue over and over again.
Yeah, and I'll take a different perspective, which is, it's concerning to me that, to hear that the Environmental Commission is deciding these issues because it's never come to council about the electric poles and those decisions that are being made. So if that is the case, I think that's a different reason why we need policy. And again, I appreciate Marianne's emphasis on the team members need to be involved in this. So yeah, I mean, this is ultimately not a commission decision. So, okay. Any other comments? All right, so then Judy, let's go ahead and call the roll.
DeWar Leonard.
And we're voting on creating a policy.
So can I make a comment? I didn't know we were jumping to this point. So this process is a bummer. I feel like I don't know anything about ponds. I don't know about how algae should work.
Okay, we're not talking about Ellis Pond, though. We're talking about a policy on herbicide. That's the second.
Oh, sorry. So there's 2 things we're voting on. So number 1 is we're both purely a motion on making a
herbicide.
Okay.
Which would still have to come to council and be discussed and yeah.
Okay.
I have a question on that. Is that going to preempt us being able to do the work that we need to do on Ellis Pond?
I think that's a different issue.
Okay.
Okay.
But as long as we're clear, because, I mean, I think the things we're talking about in the herbicide policy might pertain to Ellis Pond, but so it's like 2 herbicide policies. A general one and then an Ellis Pond, or am I?
Well, we can reverse the vote if you prefer, and vote on Ellis Pond first, and then a policy. I don't
know that matters. I mean, but I guess the question is, does exploring a policy mean that, nothing happens until that policy is figured out? I think that's what Josue is asking and Kevin's bringing up. I don't see it that way.
No.
And I have my understanding that it wouldn't. We will be exploring, if council were to approve this, we will be, if I understand the motion.
Well, let me make a friendly amendment.
Yes.
The amendment is that this vote to create a policy on the use of herbicides is not including this application that's currently proposed on Ellis Pond, that that's off the table for this vote.
Okay. All right. So, Gavin, you ready to cast your vote?
I guess so.
Okay, and that is
Yes.
okay.
All right, McQueen,
Yes.
Stokes.
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
Ouch.
Yes. Okay. Ellis, yes.
Well, Rebecca, I don't know if you still want to.
Number,
Well, as a member of the EC, when we discussed this, it was solved with Marianne's amendment. I don't think that policy will take longer, right? So
Okay.
the
Yep.
timing, we worked out the timing.
Okay. So let's talk
Okay.
about Ellis Pond.
second motion. I request that council vote to delay the use of the proposed herbicide at Ellis Pond in order to complete a process recommended by the Environmental Commission that was included in our packet last month. And that process is to get local citizens who have volunteered and who have expertise on pond ecology as well as geology on short-term and long-term solutions for Ellis Pond.
Okay.
And, okay, so that's the motion.
All right. Is there a second?
A second.
Okay.
So I would like to address what Johnny mentioned. 3 years ago, Johnny sent an email, I believe, to me and maybe all of Environmental Commission. I don't remember who all was included. And that was before Catherine Zimmerman came on EC, who's really been pushing habitat and has brought so much expertise along with other people who are now on EC. 2 members of the Environmental Commission met with Johnny or talked with him and said that they didn't know what to do about Ellis Pond. After that, there was no communication at all between EC and staff about Ellis Pond. I'm sorry there hasn't been, and I apologize for not doing more as the council rep, but there was no communication. And it was only when this use of the herbicide was mentioned, however long it was ago, over a month ago, that I became concerned, talked to several people in the community, and then met with Johnny and Josue. And initially it seemed like, okay, the chemical made sense. And then we got the email from Michelle Burns and John DeWine, who are the downstream people. And at that point, I was, whoa, okay, this is not good to dump this chemical that's going to go down. And especially when John DeWine has been willing to step up and help with resolving this issue. And so there are various other solutions that can be done, I think. And I think it behooves us to find out what those are and use the expertise of people that we have in the community to help us do that.
Josue, did you want to comment?
Sure, I'll give some context to the work that, from the email that Marianne referenced 3 years ago, we identified this as a problem and we've been working at it since. We secured grant money to put in 3 aeration pumps. We were fortunate to get grant money from the county to put those pumps in. We also been treating it with Bartley Bell, and all those non-chemical options, they're just not working now. We need to get rid of the invasive plants, the aquatic invasive plants that are in there. And we looked at options. I actually pulled up a report yesterday that in October 1st of 2021, we reported to council that we were exploring all of these options. Among them was the chemical option to apply herbicide to control the plant growth. And so, you know, we're over 10 months in that we've been exploring all options. We really exhausted all the non-chemical options that we could, short of dredging the pond, which we estimated back a couple months ago when we received a quote, we were looking at $250,000. The issue at Ellis Pond is not new. I found, with the assistance of Judy, I found meeting minutes going back to November 4th of 1996, when the team tried dredging the pond then, and it turned out to be exuberantly expensive, and they abandoned the project. So we really worked hard at finding the best solutions to this project. We're not acting with disregard to the environment on this chemical application. We've done our jobs trying to find all the best options. It's unfortunate that this is what it's come down to, and we strongly believe, given all the conversations we've had with the experts, that this is a feasible and best short-term option. This doesn't solve the problem going on forever. There's very little that we can do right now to stem or revert the nutrient accumulation that's happening at the pond and the entry of these nutrients into the pond. That requires a long-term strategy that we need more time and more resources to deal with. I've heard the commentary from the experts that Marianne has mentioned, including Dr. DeWine. Those options are great. They're just not going to work for us right now. They're long-term options. And so I'm really left with little or no other options than what I have in front of us. And so I want to reassure council that we've really been working at this hard. We're not being negligent in our work. We've looked at all the options. We are at the point that we're at now.
That's all.
Yeah.
Okay, Rebecca, come, and then Johnny, you're next.
So Rebecca Potter, and I'm speaking as a member of the Environmental Commission. And so I appreciate that you've all looked at the Environmental Commission's recommendation, and a lot of citizen feedback also has communicated that understanding the efforts that have been made so far, there are indeed other possibilities that we can investigate. The Environmental Commission's intention here is not to dictate a solution without input from a wider range of experts who have indicated ways that we could possibly address the short-term algae growth, as well as long-term solutions, and are in the process of identifying grants that could fund a larger project, such as diverting the stream that runs near the Ellis Pond into the pond and out of the pond, dredging, landscaping, a variety of ways that we can approach it. So I think this is actually a fantastic opportunity for the village to expand what it does through its commissions, in this case in the Environmental Commission, working with community, dialoguing with village staff, not imposing an agenda here, but really working together so that our village feels like they're being heard, especially the people downstream from the pond.
As we treat this pond, and I put it in my last manager's report, that we would dam the pond so that the activation period of the chemicals, during that period that the chemicals are active, they would be contained in the pond. So they would not be leaving the site until they become inactive. So one of the concerns from Dr. DeWine is that the chemicals are somehow going to get into their pond. And we've been reassured by the professional team that we are looking to hire that the Ellis Pond will be dammed so that the period during the chemicals being active will remain on site.
Do we know whether, did you advise Josue that Dr. DeWine is aware of that, the damming of Ellis Pond?
I'm not sure I've said it publicly, but I can follow up to ensure that he understands that.
Johnny?
Well, I think I need to go back. Not that we're looking to hire, we have already hired them. They have a PO from the village and they have already secured the chemicals. And then the brakes are being halted on me. Josue is right. We was planning on sandbagging it. He will not even treat it until we have dry weather. So he's hoping to do it next week when the weather forecast. Right now, the pond is like 4 inches lower than the head wall. So he wants to make sure there's no rain in the forecast so it controls everything in the pond. One thing that Josue didn't mention is due to their growth, we've now lost another pump that I told him about this morning. So we lost another $2,000 pump due to the weeds getting up in the pump and locking it up and frying the motor. So we're looking at another expense. And at this point in time, we might as well turn them off, because if we don't do this, we're going to lose another 2 pumps and things are going to get worse. So the expert is, he doesn't want to do all the pond at one time either, because he doesn't want to kill all the oxygen growth at one time. So he wants to treat it in 2 sections and do it friendlier than what everybody thinks that we're doing.
Other questions or comments? Yeah, Gavin.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Gavin, go ahead.
So it's so hard figuring out how to talk about this stuff, because it's, it's 10 till 10, and we had some, so it's like, do we talk about this in depth? Do we, anyway, just to say, it's an interesting position to be in. So since we're given the context, the broader context here as that I'm experiencing, so that if we're about to have to vote on it, right, is that we had a council retreat, last month, I guess 2 months ago now, where staff were talking about being overworked and underappreciated. And the concern is that from the council, I think everybody shares this concern, is on the one hand, you don't want to then ask for there to be more process for staff to go through to deal with things, on the one hand. On the other hand, I assume I'm not the only person who's seen letters in the paper, who's had community members talk to us about how we address the pond. This is why I started saying, I don't know what we should do about a pond. Frankly, it's like a really big bummer to me that we can't figure this out without us having to be involved. So just to say, this is it's a tricky situation, because I can respect and appreciate there are people with opinions about this, and I'm really disinclined to do what I don't think anybody means to do directly on this particular proposal, but functionally the way it sounds like it's being heard is that it's it's a disrespect of the staff's opinion about how to address the issue. So anyway, just to say some of the things that I think are true, whether they're spoken or unspoken. And then as the new guy in particular, who doesn't know all the context about what happened with the poles and the glass farm and the, all of these pieces, it's just a really interesting position to be in. So just anyway, saying this for the purpose of communicating with my colleagues about, it would be great if we could figure out ways, and I understand there's sunshine law limitations, et cetera, to figure out how to have these conversations, have more context, in a way that doesn't feel like it's sort of now we have to make a decision at the last minute, where it's like we've already paid for the thing and it's going to be. So I'm not saying that this is it just feels like in my month and a half or two, it just feels like we often end up doing these things sort of reactive last minute, and it kind of sucks. So anyway, I don't know. This is all to say, I don't know actually how I want to vote on this. I don't really like having to vote on it, but if we're going to, that's all prep for whenever I have to say yes or no in 5 minutes.
Yes, and welcome to Village Council. Okay,
but it doesn't have to be this way, is what I'm saying.
I mean, we do have opportunities individually to have these discussions. So Mary Ann's taken that time, I've taken that time. So, I mean, we can learn more about these things, so.
But just wait, is there an expectation that we're in all seriousness, is this the kind of thing that we should be expected to have an opinion on about how a pond should be handled as a council member? I mean, seriously.
I mean, you kind of referenced the fact that it's become an issue with the community. So yeah, I think that, it doesn't mean that we have, the expertise around herbicides and all that, but we do have to make, these decisions on behalf of our constituents. So it's tough.
Okay.
If I may, I think that constituents have a lot of opinions. It is my job as the manager to consider that opinion, but still act in the best interest of the village and the citizens. Sure. And there's times where I have to make a decision that it's unpleasant. A good example is I had over 200 people petition me to not open the pool during the pandemic.
Sure. But then you brought it to council and we supported that opening of the pool, right? And so, I mean, that's the whole checks and balances thing, right? I mean, that's why we have different branches. But I hear what you're saying. I mean, this is not an easy decision.
No one, I don't think any of us are liking this. I don't like it. I wish that we had, that the Environmental Commission had a closer relationship with staff so that it was clear when staff were doing things that impacted the environment, so that the Environmental Commission could talk with staff, so that there was this mutual understanding and give and take. We don't have that relationship for whatever reason, and I'm interested in having that, but we don't. So that is why this is a last minute thing. And I've talked to Josue. He was not interested in meeting with any of these people, which is why I felt like I needed to bring it to council and just vote. We'll vote on it, yes or no.
Okay.
Can I just ask a point of clarification here of Johnny? And that is, so council votes no, you can't do it, are we out the money and out the herbicide altogether? Or
Yes,
out
yes.
the expenditure?
We're out $14,000.
Thank you.
$1,000.
So I have a simple question. I mean, it seems like this, I mean, when I look at the concerns being expressed, it sounds like those concerns are being addressed by damming the pond and taking a stepwise approach with treating portions of the pond. So like, is that not adequate? I'm a layperson. I too don't, I didn't attend the Pond 101 course, but it seems reasonable that if you end the threat of downstream transmission, then there's no downstream transmission. And at some point, I mean, it is science. You know, chemicals have a shelf life, and I'm hearing the phrase activation period. I mean, is that not legitimate in that damming the pond, treating in a stepwise manner, and allowing those chemicals, somebody did some work and said, this thing will stay active for 12 hours, 50, whatever, and then after that, it's just water.
Go ahead, Carmen.
This is not related to that, but kind of. So one of the concerns that I had, Johnny kind of addressed, and that was the step treatment
of the pond, because if you dump all that stuff in there, what's going to happen is the nitrogen is going to go up, oxygen's going to go down, the red-eared sliders, the bluegill, the rock bass that are in there, the crawdads, everything that depends on oxygen for survival, the saturated oxygen that's in the water is going to die. Johnny addressed that by stating that would be done in a step-by-step manner. So I appreciate that. What I'm in favor of is if we have resources in the community and we're able better to communicate with one another, then these things can be addressed before they reach critical mass, right? Wouldn't have this conversation wouldn't be having this conversation if we maybe started opening these kinds of questions up, especially regarding Ellis Pond. We had someone come in here and say it was an environmental justice issue. That, as far as I'm concerned, that point was on burgeoning on the absurd. I spent a lot of time there. When there was an overflow, my grandfather, the spillway, he would just go throw pea gravel on it. When the algae started getting out of hand, when I was a kid, you know what we had? We had pond rakes and sticks. So we're jumping to putting this stuff in there. Nobody wants to use the stuff, but we're also forgetting about manually removing it. And I'm not even remotely suggesting that village staff spend their time remotely removing it. What I am suggesting is that we start to explore resources for people who can do that or who would like to do that. A pond cleanup day, some pond rakes. It's not deep enough to put anything in. There's no boats going in there, but there are manual ways to do it. And then after all this stuff dies, who's going to come get it out? it's just going to be dead. So there are a lot of questions that we need to address, and I don't like to see us kind of deteriorating this way. And that's really all I have to say about it.
Go ahead, Gavin.
Yeah, and so I think this just fits what I said before, but like the challenge is like it's not any one of these things. Like it totally makes sense, the idea of having more citizen input on X thing, and then if you're staff, I think it's just a question of where does that line stop, and not, I don't know. This is the tricky thing, and I'll just say specifically, it seems to me like we have a staffing issue. Like it seems to me like we don't have enough capacity to have the amount of community input that we would like in decision making. That in terms of having recommendations, having community dialogue in 2.5 months or whatever I've been doing this, it seems like it's a regular occurrence that there's not enough staffing to provide the level of engagement that is desired by the community. So in terms of putting it into sort of broader context of what I'm hearing from the community and what I'm seeing personally, that seems like an issue. And so I'm just naming that's something I'd like to try to figure out how to address collectively over time. And we have to figure out how to do this specific thing.
Well, maybe there's a both and. Maybe we could say, okay, do this double application of this chemical, and that staff be willing to allow community input by people who do have expertise on thinking about how we can manage this pond in the future without dumping chemicals.
I think community input is important, but I think community labor is also important. I think some sweat equity, as it's called, is also very important.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say is, I guess I don't think this conversation is a deterioration as much as it's a difficult topic. I mean, and there are some, I think, strong opinions on both sides. So, I mean, that's where things become challenging, and that's a lot of, the decisions that we have to make these days. I mean, it's nice to do all the resolutions that we do, but, this is the real work. So, all right, Rebecca, really quick. Come on up.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Johnny also wants to.
Okay.
Just as an advocate of the EC, I think this is an opportunity for you all, understanding everything that Josue and Johnny have said, to go with a community's desire to ask the community for that labor, for that commitment before you use the chemical. And show a certain amount of trust, because I think, as you all said, that is generally what this community wants. We have to be reasonable if it has to be used, but right now where we're at is that we want to try to solve the problem without the chemical application.
Okay. Johnny?
Yeah, I got one thing, two things with Carmen on the plants that as chemical will release the plant, the other chemical will absorb the plant to where it dies and it dissolves in the water. It does not just lay there dead. The other thing that I want to make sure, and I want to put it out there, disclaimer, 911, whatever I do not want people going out there and trying to go into Ellis Pond with the rakes.
No, I mean,
how deep it is. I don't want people being called 911 because my little Johnny drowned in the pond.
Oh, God.
Please don't take that literally that we're looking for.
Yes, please don't do that.
Thanks, Johnny. Yes, do not go into Ellis Pond. All right. Okay. So, Marianne, are you modifying, or are we voting on this, or what are we?
No, let's just vote on what I said, and it'll go up or down, and I'm going to assume that I know that the Environmental Commission is interested in having Ellis Pond be something that is more natural, and is interested in getting other people's ideas about how we can make it better.
Okay. Okay. Judy, let's go ahead and call the roll.
You want to state the question, the singular question, which I think is delaying
Yeah.
Yes, delaying the chemical application.
Yeah, it was actually to delay the use of herbicide to complete the process proposed by EC.
Yeah.
Ready?
Yes.
All right, Brown,
Yes.
Stokes,
No.
McQueen,
Yes.
Leonard,
Yes.
Couch.
Yes. Okay. All right, future agenda items.
While we consider future agenda items, I want to acknowledge an audience member, and Narita, if I get your name wrong, please forgive me. I think it's Narita Alexander. She's part-time resident of the village, has a home here, but is here for the high school reunion. Watches these meetings all the time. More than most, I'm sure. But we met over the weekend, and she had some very good insights, and it was a very, very pleasant conversation. So I just wanted to acknowledge you, that you're here. I think you did say you would be here, and I'm happy to see you, and I appreciate your support.
Sure. Welcome. Okay. Future agenda items. All right, so we will be bringing stormwater, right? Okay, and then,
CRB.
okay, CRB. And then I do want to bring back the Finance Committee discussion about some of the other revenue issues. Anything else?
You have meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m., executive session, starts at 10, we'll bring in. See you in the morning.
Okay.
There's that.
Yep, Gavin?
So in terms of the letter we received about, looking into what it would take for the village to offer abortion access as a benefit, what's the appropriate way? Like, is that something that's already being looked into? I don't know how it should that be a future agenda item? Like, how do we know whether that's something we've pursued or?
Yeah, I think it should be. And then we'll talk about at agenda planning how we
incorporate that.
What are we talking about, for employees or for general?
For employees.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, anything else? Okay, if not, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All right, thanks, everyone. See you in the morning. All right.
I forgot about you.